We good? Go. All right. Any? Okay. All right. It is. I always look for the clock and it's been moved. I can't see that. 5:01. We're going to start up the Business Services Committee meeting here on Monday, November 27th. No citizen comments tonight. So we're going to hop right into for discussion. Our first agenda item is RSP.
All right, so
he's normally sitting right where the hat is.
The agenda item tonight is just an update to the enrollment report that RSP completed last year. As part of the boundary analysis, they needed to complete an updated enrollment report incorporating this year's data. So I would like to introduce Robert Schwartz from RSP.
Great, good evening. Tonight we'll kind of be at that 100,000 foot perspective. My hope is that since you've had an enrollment analysis here 7-8 months ago, some of this is review. And so we'll try to hit you at the high point. You will have a lot of information from me over the next couple nights with the public input. So that's a totally separate conversation, but something that is definitely going to be important over the next couple days. There we go. So a little bit about RSP. Obviously, we've been doing a lot of work with you. This page gives you a showcase of some of the stuff we've done. If you remember, we've completed your last enrollment analysis. We did a capacity analysis of your buildings, and now we're entering the last stages, most important stages of some public input tomorrow and Wednesday with the solutions based on the information you, the board and administration, have provided us in how to look at the use of your buildings. So there's always expectations in our reports. This is an important page to understand some of the icons, understand pages that we think are important for you to know what's happening in your district. It's broken out into these 4 steps or 4 parts. I'm just going to talk about a few of the important things in each of these parts that really set the stage for what's going to happen over the next 2 evenings. So when we looked at your enrollments, we do believe there'll be an enrollment increase in your district over the next 5 years. We'll talk a little bit about how some of those things are coming into perspective. Facilities that have challenges, this is all kind of a moot point when we get into the realignments and reuse of buildings. And so keep that in mind as you look at this. This is the given situation. This is not anything with any of the boundaries or program changes that are happening in buildings. This is if we continue to use the inventory as it has been used this current school year. Visually, the district boundary, this helps us understand the villages and cities that are within your district boundary, which is the purple line. Remember, we have our existing elementary boundaries. So these colors all represent each of those attendance areas. Same thing with our middle school attendance areas and our high school. If you remember, we break everything down to a planning area, so a geography of a known type of developments. This map is to give you a visual of what that means as we look at the built environment. So the dots for each of those parcels represent a year in which it was built. This is a statistical forecast model. And last year, when we projected for this year, we were 98.2% accurate in our projections. Some things had slowed a little bit from what we initially thought last year. We'll talk about that and what that meant with some of the variables and how that got adjusted against the statistical model. We looked at live birth data and continue to try to examine what is the metric for maybe a future number of kindergartners. And so this table takes us down to 2021 with the live births that we're showing in King County. The green and yellow cells that are to the right give us a range based on the market share. The really good thing for the district, the low side would be more like what we saw in 2007, 2008. We're typically close to 11% of the market share 5 years later. So even with the decrease of the number of live births, when we look at that second column, we're gaining a greater share than what we saw back in 2007. We showed the same thing with DuPage County, not as many kids in that area. Past enrollment by grade. The first thing that stands out here, I mentioned this last year, our senior classes are larger than the following year's incoming kindergarten class. That starts to indicate potential for a decrease. We look at the enrollment by grade. This is where that gets offset because we see strong cohort increases year to year, in many cases double digits, as you go from like second to third to fourth. One of the largest is 8th to 9th grade. The decreases that we see in the high school, that's pretty typical across all the Illinois districts that we work with. But again, this is shaping up to say, hey, with this cohort change, increases. When we look at our past enrollment class sizes, this is a new visual that we wanted to just kind of help you understand what's happening in the district. When we compare the K-12 class size average, you can see that it's decreased over time. And when we look at the grade level, you can see there's kind of a convergence where the elementary is the red line, the middle school is the blue line, the green line's the high school. So we tend to have larger grades in the high school, middle school, smaller grades in elementary. That cohort change I explained, that's what you see on this visual. We looked at migration. So the student change from year to year, we're showing the last 3 school years. The green parts of the bar represent students that were receiving services the previous year, but then in the year that we're doing the analysis, they're not receiving services. So they're out migration. They've left the district from receiving services. The orange part represents students that are new to the district that were not here the previous school year. So we've seen a very strong net increase, although it was greater in 2021-22 than it has been the last 2 years, still a positive trend. So it points to enrollment growth. We looked at out-of-district analysis. This has continued to decline. So these are students that are coming into the district and where they're coming from. So you can see over time, it's decreased. We look at those planning areas we created, and this is fundamental to some of the things when we start to put together what could a future boundary look like with all of the different changes. This little point in time helps us know where we're seeing some increases, where we're seeing decreases. The orange are increasing, the green is decreasing. So you can see it's quite a bit different. If we showed this map last year, comparing it 5 years previous, it would look different than what you see here. That's how we get into that subdivision life cycle, the statistics of what's happening in each of these planning areas. Heat map shows where the students are. So the greatest concentration is the red. So you can see that up on the north side of our district near Coron Elementary. And we see a mixture of potential for increases and decreases, and that's what's showcased here on page 22. You know, I always try to leave you with some of those metrics. So when you question why are we thinking something happens, you can go back to those visuals. We get into the developments. One thing that we were focusing on are these 3 variables. So the green line represents census population, and we see that it's been declining over the last few years. Blue line represents the building activity, certificate of occupancies. We've seen some activity, but really the last 3 years has all been under 100 units. The red line represents our enrollment change, oscillates quite a bit. the pandemic is the big reason for the decrease there of 423 students. But you can see we're still, over the last couple of years, we've seen some decline in enrollments. We look at yield rates. This visual illustrates with single family the number of units that we get for every 100 units for K-5 students. And we show it by each of the current attendance areas. So you get a sense of where the student population is with this particular housing product. Key thing here is when I look at like Coron Elementary, it's decreased. Back in 2012 was 44. It's 36 as of this year's student data. Those are the things we try to capture in our data. Multifamily, same thing. For every 100 multifamily units, how many K-5 students are we getting? And it's quite a bit less than what we get with single family. And it has declined again in this same time period. We've looked at where things have been built. So this gets at that census data and the age of each of those units, aggregate it to the planning area to get a sense of how old the housing inventory is. A map that we've updated based on some confusion with some of the villages that sent data, what the data meant. This is, and I've labeled this on these maps, assessed median home value. So when we look at each of the planning areas and what the assessed value is, how does that look throughout your entire district? So this isn't what you can sell your house for, it's how your taxes are based on. And that is somewhat normalized in all of the townships when we have those values. From that, we looked at where we were seeing building activity as it changed from last year. The dots represent where that activity is occurring. Again, there's not been that much activity over the last 3 years, less than 100 units. We look at development over time. This visual helps tell us that most of our development growth happened in the 80s, the 90s, and the 2000s. And definitely this last decade from 2010 to 2019, not nearly as much building activity as what we've seen in any of the 4 previous decades. We're about built out. Some of the areas where we think there's possibility for growth are highlighted in this map. The green areas are things that are currently under construction, yellow, likely in the next 5 years. A little bit of opportunity, but not a lot. More of it's going to be around the mall on the east side. All that stuff on the map ties back to this development, so you get a sense of where the development, type of developments, how many units there are. So I kind of got us with the developments. With some developments, some of these are indicating that should mean that we see more growth. Some of the subdivision life cycle of the existing inventory if interest rates, as some are forecasting, were to start to decrease with that happening.
Hey, Robert, real quick on the development table, there's a couple spots on there where there's new construction, corner of like Silver Glen and Randall. There's a number of units going up. I didn't see that in there. Where do we get the source data for this? Was this a request to the different municipalities? Where did this come from?
Correct. So any of the things that we either gleaned from conversation or we tried to look through the planning commission, city council type minutes to see developments. And then when I'm up there the next 2 days, I'm really kind of getting eyes on what is the status of those developments and whatnot. So if there's some things that aren't on here, we can talk with Dr. Gordon and team to see what type of impact this might be. But I know most of it was around the mall and a few sprinklings.
Yeah, Paul, I can give you a couple of the ones that I noticed were missing. Okay, thank you.
Another thing as I move into the projections, if they're 55 plus developments, we don't even put those on the map. So if they end up being that may be one reason why they're not on there. So as we look at our enrollment forecast, again, stable with some slight increases overall. So this is a visual you've seen before. Again, the red's the elementary grades, blue is the middle school, green is the high school, that purple line is the aggregate of all three of those. So when we look at this, it's again a stable enrollment, but that's contingent on really three things. The first is our live birth rates. If they continue to decrease, we have to get a greater market share for 5 years later for that metric to play out. The second is with developments. We need to see some sort of development activity in the areas that we've designated and others that may not yet show on the map. And then the third piece is this cohort change, where we see this infusion of kids specifically at the elementary level, and how that ties into migration. We need to continue trends that are similar to what's been happening over the last 3 years. If any one of those don't happen at a particular rate, our ability to be a stable enrollment is going to be challenged. As we look at this breakdown by building, you can see this chart here where we showed the orange shading. Again, this is the current boundary. So this is all different. When we get to what we're presenting to the community tomorrow and Wednesday, this will look entirely different as we take Lincoln offline and Fox Ridge comes online. As we just move some of this stuff around, it just changes some things. This is a great baseline for the community to see if we kept doing things the way we are doing things. We have many different capacity issues in different buildings in each of the years through 28, 29. We've highlighted those as an orange shading. For each of the buildings, you'll see this functional capacity that RSP provided for each of those buildings. This transcribes over into what you're going to see the next 2 nights for the capacity of those buildings. We show a breakdown in the past school years 3 ways based on if the student is residing in that attendance area. So that's the middle row, green fonts. The bottom row, blue font, attend. Are they actually attending that building? And then the top row is a reside/attend. Do they actually reside and attend? So this gives you kind of that makeup of the choices of where programs are or are not, but basically what I would say choice to a certain extent, whether it's through the school district or the parent, there's something that's happening where they're not going to the building that they reside in. And this gives you that benchmark. Same thing for the secondary buildings. And one thing that I wanted to highlight with our secondary buildings, particularly the middle school, we don't have a lot of space in those buildings, those 2 buildings. So however we slice the middle school up, one building's going to likely be slightly over. That's a conversation that we're having with administration. What does that really mean? How can there be some additions to some of those buildings at some point in the future that might alleviate some of those challenges? We see that happens in 2 of the 5 years that we're projecting. It's not always over that capacity. So again, here's a breakdown, some of the driving forces of our forecast. Again, I feel pretty good about with all of the data that we had new last year and trying to baseline out what's changing since the pandemic. I think this next year's forecast probably is going to hone in where we should be 99 to 100% accurate in what we're seeing happens in the buildings, just because we have more understanding. Some of that may change with the boundary changes. So sometimes boundary changes influence people to make some different decisions where they live, what buildings they go to. That kind of gets us into some of our next steps, which is the exciting part tomorrow. Another plug for the public to come to our meetings, to see things, hear what this is about, provide some input. But tonight was just really a focus on what the status is of our enrollments, our building trends, and what that means for enrollment as we move forward into the future. So I'm going to stop there. If there's questions that relate to the enrollment, building, or projections, I have a few minutes to be able to answer those. Otherwise, I'll see you guys in person over the next 2 nights.
Is it appropriate, and are you willing to tell us what we would see, what the presentation will be like tomorrow night, and how people, what you have planned for the folks who are there? I'm not asking for the presentation itself, just the process.
Yeah, absolutely. If that's fine with Dr. Gordon, I can definitely dig in.
Yeah, just a high level overview of how we're going to kick it off, kind of what you're going to review with the community would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So first I'll have all the board members stand in front of me and I'll hide behind you.
We're actually not allowed to be in the same part of the room, so that's going to be hard.
All right, so we'll have to figure that logistic out. No, but in all seriousness, what will happen is Dr. Gordon will kick things off with an introduction, pop it over to myself. We'll talk about in a condensed version of what I've presented to you tonight. We'll talk about the criteria, those guiding principles, what's happening with buildings, what are the metrics by which we're looking at to create the scenarios, concepts that they're going to receive, those guiding principles. And then at that point, I'll kind of go over some of it generally with what's happened, because there's some things that because you do this, it puts certain things in motion. But my goal is to, as quickly as possible with having the right context, then releasing the persons that are in attendance to go to all of the same stations and see the maps and have discussion in that small group setting. Myself and some of the admin team will be floating through the stations to try to help steer everyone towards the survey, which is going to be just incredible, with the ability for them to get a lot of information that's going to tie back to your website, have things that will give them the ability to provide us some understanding of what they think about those concept scenarios, so that we can, if possible, make changes between now and the next time that we have a conversation with you, the Board of Education. So that's kind of the general framework. Our team, we're looking forward to this. This is the best part, because everything that we've been working on does the community understand how these different moving parts positively impact the experiences students have, whether it's dual language or just being in buildings that have the right spaces for programming that needs to take place.
Just one thing for the next 2 days. Can we make sure that the projections and the functional capacity for Richmond and Davis are up to date? Because these are still the old figures.
Yeah, they'll have all of those pieces on the new boards.
Okay.
I'm talking into the closed mic. Yeah, they'll have all those pieces.
Okay.
Again, it's going to be high level,
Right.
but yes, those pieces will be updated for tomorrow.
Perfect.
All right, Rob, safe travels. We will see you tomorrow night.
You bet. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I just reiterate to our community, to a board, either in person at North tomorrow evening, 6 p.m. At North. You will hear the presentation from Rob and RSP, and then we will ask you to go out to view the large boards and then give feedback. But you're also more than welcome to join us virtually. We will be streaming Rob's comments. So anybody, if you're at home or wherever, you're able to kind of get the big overview, but then again, jump into the surveys to be able to give the district, the board feedback in that manner as well. So both are absolutely acceptable. You're going to get the same experience in both venues, either in person at North tomorrow night, on Wednesday night at East, or virtually. Both will have access to the survey, and that's really where that's where the feedback will be collected, is through that. Mr. Lackner, back over to you.
All right, moving on to for discussion B, the fiscal 2023 audit. Justin, take us away.
So Miller Cooper, the district's audit firm, has been working on the fiscal year 23 audit since the middle of summer. Normally that includes several weeks of field work here on site, through a review of our financial statements and all of the supporting documentation, and then also review of our internal controls. So tonight we have John Epperson, who is the audit principal for the district, to review the results of the audit.
Good evening. I don't intend to go over all the financial numbers. They're kind of still numbers at this point. So I'm just going to go over some of the highlights and things I'm required to communicate. At this point, we're to draft and we're ready to go final probably as soon as the end of this week. So we'll be able to issue in plenty of time to meet the December 15th ISB deadline without issue. At this point, we're prepared to issue what's referred to as an unmodified opinion or clean opinion. So that's the highest level of assurance that we can get. That's a good thing. I can tell you that the team provided great cooperation. We've had no issues throughout gathering information, asking questions. And we also don't have any internal control findings that we have to report. Everything we went through, things seemed in order. We didn't even find anything very minor that we felt we needed to address in writing, which is all good. We also didn't have any material corrected or uncorrected misstatements as we went through the audit. We did have adjustments that we have to make ordinarily as part of the audit process for reporting, but nothing that's really sort of outside of the ordinary or things that were not brought to our attention by management themselves. The other thing that you'll see within the financial statements that's just new for this year, the Governmental Accounting Standards Board issued a new standard that was applicable for this year's statements related to subscription-based information technology arrangements. Fancy words, but what it basically means is that certain things, which there are longer term arrangements to use software, you would put on the books on a government-wide level and amortize them off over time. So that's something new that will be in there. There's about $1.2 million of total, I guess, subscription assets that you'll see that are new this year. And that's really something that hadn't been there before. And that's really the highlights that I have. Were there any questions that anybody had overall about the process or the findings?
So I'm surprised there's only 1.2 million for subscription services for all of our stuff.
Certain ones, it depends on the nature of and the length of those agreements. So if they're
Okay.
annual ones that are renewable,
Then we don't
they
have
don't
to.
qualify. But
Okay,
anyone
since
that's a
we
multi-year.
do so many that are annual. Got it. That makes sense then.
Yeah, because if you have the right to terminate them, they don't qualify as longer term, and thus they wouldn't qualify as a long-term asset.
Okay. Okay. Any questions?
Have a great
All right.
evening.
Thank you.
Before we move on to the next agenda item, I did just want to take a minute. Thank you, John, for joining us tonight. The opinion that John expressed that there were no even minor internal control findings, really, to me, that's just a testament to the hard work that Melissa Mader and the team in the business office, everything that they do on a daily basis. So I did just want to take a moment here to commend the team in the business office for all their hard work. And this is the result.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, moving on to our Mid-Valley October 2023 financial report.
Okay, so Mid-Valley is reporting that their revenue is trending very close to the prior year. They would like to point out that there is a prior ESY revenue that is currently being reported as other local a refund from prior year that is distorting the percent of budget on an individual category. But again, overall, they are reporting that the revenue is trending very close to last year. Expenditures are trending ahead of the prior year, but there are no areas of concern at this time.
Any discussion? No. All right, moving on to 303 October 2023 financial report.
Again, here, overall revenue is trending very close to the prior year. As you can see, other local revenue is trending ahead of the prior year, while federal funds are behind, which is expected for this year. Overall, expenditures are trending close to the prior year. The two accounts with the most fluctuation from the prior year is capital outlay, which is trending higher due to the timing of like the boiler replacement and the work set to begin on Lincoln and Haynes and the security alarm system. Some of those expenses have started to hit. And tuition is also trending ahead due to the timing of tuition payments. So there are no areas of concern at this time.
Okay. Moving on to our notice of public hearing to adopt the aggregate tax levy for the year 2023.
So last month at Business Services, we talked about the tentative tax levy for tax year 2023. And then the board did adopt the tentative tax levy earlier this month at the board meeting. This is just the required public hearing to actually adopt the tax levy that we're putting on the agenda for the December board meeting.
Okay. All right. Then moving on to item F, the resolution to adopt the 2023 aggregate tax levy.
And then this is the actual resolution that the board will adopt, or that we're asking the board to adopt in December. There have been no changes between the tentative tax levy and the final tax levy. So all the numbers that were presented at Business Services last month have remained the same.
Yep, for action. Okay. Moving on, item G, program cost analysis.
So this is a continuation of a conversation that we had a few months ago. The board had a couple questions about some of the items that we did the analysis for. Just as a reminder, all of the costs that we are talking about are actual costs from the 22-23 school year. And this discussion will actually continue through March of 24. So this will not be the last night that we're going to be talking about this. This is part of the superintendent's goals to come up with a standard cost metric for evaluating the financial implications of the existing programs and any proposed programs. So this will be a continuing conversation through March that we'll have at certain intervals going forward. So the attachment that we've included in your packet, again, it reflects actual costs from last school year. We looked at each program independently to determine the applicable costs that are specific to that program. We did exclude any centralized expenditures because we didn't want to double count them across programs. So these are actual expenditures that are directly related to the individual programs. So you have two charts in your attachment. Figure 1 is including all program revenue that has been collected for last school year for any programs that do receive revenue, either locally through school fees or any grant funding. And then figure 2, the second chart in the attachment, isolates the cost specific to each program. So basically any cost above and beyond what you would see in a traditional classroom setting. So costs that only exist because of that program. So that can include the specific staff members like native language tutors, any fees paid to outside agencies and vendors, student transportation related to the individual programs. So we have those separated out in that second chart. Are there any questions?
We have a mix of programs here, some of which have required portions as well as discretionary portions. For example, early childhood, and the costs are combined within the early childhood program. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. Is there a way for us to think about which portion of those costs are due to regulatory requirement versus those that are not?
There is, unfortunately for 22-23. So historically, the district has, in their accounting software, has combined all early childhood costs into a single sub-fund. So that would take some accounting adjustments, which we can absolutely do going forward. But as we look back to 22-23, those costs are going to be very difficult to split out. But it is something that we can look at in our accounting software moving forward.
Do we have to put that as an action item to do that, or is that something that you can just?
When we can take care of that
Okay.
as we're developing next year's budget, that's something that we'll look at on the
Okay.
accounting side.
Thank you.
Is there a reason why we don't have all-day kindergarten on here? Should we have all day kindergarten on here?
On here.
Mhm.
So the programs that we included here were programs that we discussed with the board, I think 6 months ago.
Okay.
So we've only included those programs. If there are additional programs that we wanted to look at going forward, that is absolutely something that we can add.
It might be something we have to do, right, for the new law,
Well, it's coming up.
27, though. Right.
I think with it, we should
Add it.
identify it as a separate program.
Yep, absolutely. We'll
Yeah.
include that going forward.
And the other thing I wondered were particular programs under special ed. And I didn't know if those are mostly required, but I didn't know if you wanted to include that.
I don't
I don't know what I don't know what we're actually going to decide because of this. I mean, are we
Well,
going?
just to refresh everybody, I think we've had some discussions on this previously, right? And we've talked about a way to evaluate these programs, both from a cost perspective as well as an academic or an outcome-based perspective. And part of Paul's goals for the year, we did set what's a standard metric that we can start to use to evaluate these programs so that we essentially take the money out of it, right? So we could say, look, we know what this costs, we know what's above and beyond any of our other costs that we're required, to provide. And then we can take it to L&T and go, okay, what are we getting out of this, right? We may have something that is a high cost program, as an example, that is a high cost program, but we are seeing incredible results out of it. And we may want to go and look at it and say, okay, what would it take to expand this program or to do other things with it, right? So that's why we originally started this. I think actually the journey for this started before I joined the board, and then we've kind of narrowed it down a bit, so.
I probably wouldn't include special ed in there because it's so vast, and then each student under, an individual education plan can look so different. And it would really we would have to really get into almost every IEP and really determine cost based off of those pieces, especially when you're thinking about individual students. And it's mandated. I think, I don't know if it would give the board a lot of information to make, what Thomas was talking about, make larger decisions about special education.
Well,
Push on me if I'm wrong.
Well, we're talking about least restrictive environment. And so there are children who cannot be in a general ed classroom because of their IEP. And that could very well be a very costly program. My question is really, would we get rid of that program because it's so costly? Looking at what the disability in the IEP, I just want us to be very careful where we're going with all of this.
Yeah, I think that's why it was excluded, so that we wouldn't start having those conversations, right? So I'd rather not bring it in to this, muddy the waters. I think the scope of this was pretty well set.
And
And I've been part of those discussions, but now we're getting the actual money. I just want us to keep in front of us what our purpose is for this.
I may be unclear here, but I don't think we can really talk about getting rid of a mandated program. So, we may want to know what it costs, but
That's what
that would be just for our own edification, that we're not getting rid of a program that's mandated.
Right, I would agree. And that would be the value, that if we decided to do that, that would be the value that I would see. So we had an understanding of how some of the programs cost, what the cost was, and is there an opportunity to
Efficiencies.
lean something?
If there's any opportunity for efficiency, we might discover that.
Mhm.
But again, if it's a mandated program, we aren't getting rid of it. So-
Right.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, the cost to deliver might be one thing, but the program's presence is mandated. I think one of the challenges when you look at the list that's in figure 1, we have some programs that are commingled and some that are mandated. So we have English language learner program. Not sure what's in that and if that's 100% mandated services versus not. And then we have dual language, which is not a mandated service. And so two programs geared towards related ends. So I think the idea of saying, you know, these are the ways that we think about the costs associated with mandated programs is one thing. The discretionary programs is another. And of course, then we have the ones that are commingled. That's not really reflected here.
I apologize. I just wanted to put a little bit of perspective around the special education program. So under federal law, I mean, we can certainly look at our costs, but we are not allowed to make decisions as it relates to the services we provide based upon the cost of the service. We have to really identify what kids need. And then depending on what they need, we're required to provide that service. So I just wanted to put that out there. Certainly information we can use and have. I just want to put some perspective into how we can use that information.
And again, why I don't think it was included to begin with. And, you know, when we look at it, probably not worthwhile, at least at this juncture, when we're trying to get our hands around some standard metrics to muddy the waters with it.
Again, I'm just going to say that I want us to keep in front of us the reasons we are doing this. I'm looking at some of these programs, and it could be easy for us to just say, let's get rid of that. It's too costly and there aren't great results. I just want us to be sure as a board that we are keep in front, because we're very transparent with the public, that we're not necessarily looking at this to get rid of programs, but more to have a better understanding of the cost of those programs. Am I saying it accurately?
I mean, to me, like I said, I think the cost of a program is one aspect of said program, right? The other aspect that I think is this board has been very clear on, right, are the outcomes, right? And so to me, when you're evaluating a program, we might not be getting great outcomes, but the program might be costly, right? Those are two pieces of information that this board should look at to then evaluate said program, right? It may be something that we're getting great outcomes out of, and it's paid for by grants. Awesome. You know, how do we ramp that up? Right. So again, to your point, I think it's very important that you can't really have a two-legged stool on this, but there's definitely an academic outcomes and a fiscal aspect of it.
The only thing I'd add to that is I would like to, for the programs that are, where there's a mandated program and there is a non-mandated program, if they can be disaggregated so that we can take a look at those, look at the costs and look at the efficiency there. If there's ways for mandated programs where we can increase the efficiency, I'd certainly like to be able to do that. I don't know that that's probably getting way into the weeds here for what we're talking about now, but I don't think it is to say, let's disaggregate those programs that are mandated and, but there are associated programs that are not.
Yeah, I think just visually in this, when we look at it, like some of the programs are related, right? Like just some grouping of it and maybe a couple details about it, if it is mandated or if there are aspects of it that it covers that we need, might be helpful in when we look at this, and especially as we expose it more to the public.
On that, I'm sorry, and one more thing on that note, I'd like the public to pay attention to those mandated programs and what are unfunded mandates.
Yeah.
Because seriously, I'd like the public, I always encourage the public to contact their legislators that are above us to tell them what they think. And if we have programs that are unfunded mandates, they might let them know that.
Yeah, the state has almost 700 unfunded mandates for all school districts, right? Or they're not all unfunded, right? But there's almost 700 mandates that are placed on every single school district. So a good portion of them are unfunded.
I think it's fitting that we'll have a discussion in the second committee meeting of the evening around the student achievement report and outcomes. I think Mr. Lentz is right on when he says there's no way to evaluate the programs on the dollar cost alone. There has to be some statement about the academic intention and the positive student outcome potential of that program in the same breath. And so while we look at the dollars, the question of how it impacts the board's most important academic achievement goals that are reflected in the student achievement report, I think on page 37, is the most important portion of that conversation. So I appreciate that we were getting the dollars here. I would ask that the L&T team start to think very directly about how we will talk about the results or the outcomes that every one of these dollar line item investments achieves for students.
Any further discussion on this one? Thank you, Justin. I think we're all looking forward to seeing this get refined, so. All right, moving forward, we're moving on to H, the Cranston Meadows property lease.
So a few months ago, we had a conversation about all of the vacant parcels that the school district owns. There are 9 within district boundaries. 2 of those parcels exist next to Cranston Meadows Park at the corner of Falcons Trail and Cloverfield Drive. St. Charles Park District has expressed interest in leasing those properties from us, primarily because they have a park that exists right next to those parcels. So their hope is to lease those with the intention of eventually buying the 2 parcels from the school district, and they would like to expand their park across those 2 parcels. So essentially the 3 parcels all right in a row. They are actively working on scheduling the renovation for the 2024 calendar year of that park. So they are hoping that they can include this in their budget. So I wanted to bring this to the board and gauge the board's interest in leasing those 2 vacant parcels to the park district.
So Justin, you mentioned lease to own, correct? Any details on the lease period prior to purchase?
We have not gone, I wanted to gauge the board's interest before we entered any type of negotiation. So we haven't, I know that has been a topic that the executive director of the park district has brought up multiple times to me, but we have not gotten into any terms. And obviously we would circle back with the board before we agreed to anything.
Thanks.
They were included, those parcels were included in the market assessment.
Correct.
And how will that figure into the discussion with the park district?
That will figure in very heavily because we have current market value of those properties. So that will be incorporated in the negotiations if we were to move forward.
Can I
I
just,
would be supportive. Oh, go ahead.
I just wondered what the history was of that parcel. Is that from the subdivision?
Yeah,
Just
so
green space?
it's actually how we acquired most of our random vacant parcel. So there is an option when a development comes in that they can either provide land cash or they can provide land. And several of the parcels that we own that are unusable for the school district came because the developer decided to provide land instead of land cash. So that's how we acquired most of these.
And this parcel is unusable for us, correct?
Correct. They're too small and they're located in the middle of a neighborhood.
Right,
I'm fine with it.
Yeah. Be fine. I think we move this to 4 action.
So we'll start negotiating with the
Yeah.
park district, and then once we have negotiated lease terms, then we'll bring those back to the board.
Got it. All right. Moving on to our construction update.
So in the past month, we've had the opportunity to put several projects out to bid, specifically for the upcoming renovations at Haines and Lincoln. Specifically, the abatement for Haines and Lincoln have both been put out to bid, as well as the complete renovation project package for Haines, with the intent that we'll have a recommendation for award next month at committee. In addition to that, within the next month, we'll see the complete Lincoln renovation out to bid, as well as a lot of roofing work that we anticipate completing this next summer. As we start to have these projects that go out to bid and starting to make awards, we'll have a better understanding of how our construction dollars are going to align with what was originally presented in our 5-year CIP. Once those numbers start to come on, we'll begin reporting more of that on every couple of months, as we previously discussed at past committee meetings. One thing I do want to lean in on today is to discuss our different procurement methods that we're utilizing for our construction purchases over the next couple of years. We do have the traditional design bid award process that we are utilizing for our large construction projects at Haines and Lincoln this summer. As that kind of refers to is we go through the design project process. Architects help us put out to bid. We go through the traditional bid process to get bids and then bring it for award. Another avenue that we will be utilizing, as you've seen in the past few months and will continue to utilize over the upcoming months, is cooperative purchasing agreements. So what these are contracts that are bid out by public agencies throughout the country with the intent that they can be utilized by other public agencies. And these contracts vary in scope from furniture to paper goods for facilities to construction services for major renovations. So as the opportunity allows, we do evaluate these different types of cooperative purchasing agreements when it is advantageous for the district. Right now, we are able to take advantage of a lot of these contracts that were bid out several years ago, before we saw major increases in a lot of our markets. So we're trying to take advantage of those where we can. And additionally, these types of contracts, they really allow us to take advantage of volume discounts. So we are bidding, these contracts are utilized by many organizations throughout the country, and we can take advantage of those volume and discounted pricings along with the other organizations. So I just wanted to open up and ask if there were any questions specifically about this procurement method.
But yeah, I actually ended up in a discussion with somebody about the TIPS program. Is that what you're talking about, or is it?
Absolutely. Yeah, so there's a lot of different organizations out there or groups, but TIPS, Omnia, Sourcewell, and Equalis, I think, are the four major ones that our board has given us direction and authorization to move forward with in the past. Yeah, and the nice thing about that, there's a lot of flexibility within these contracts as well. Many of them are bid out as line item contracts. So hundreds of pages of different types of services and things that can be procured through these all fall within these contracts. But then there are different factors that are applied to your proposals based on factors such as like where you are. So in the Chicagoland area, there's a specific factor that's added onto these contracts based on our local market.
No, I think at least speaking for me, I think we were appreciative of finding any way that we can to manage the costs of these, so.
Absolutely, and I will add in not only cost, but time. This expedites the process for a lot of our projects out there, eliminating the need for design. And we can coordinate some of these efforts in-house directly with vendors through these co-op programs.
The only thing that I wanted to add, and I think Amanda alluded to this a little bit, is we've been able to take advantage this year of several contracts that were bid out pre-pandemic as multi-year contracts. So right now on a number of items, we're receiving pre-pandemic pricing that was required to be held flat by going through the purchasing cooperative. So if we were to bid those items out ourselves, the cost would be significantly inflated. So we've been able to benefit because these contracts were bid out several years ago and had to be held firm for 5 years or 6 years or whatever the contract term was. We're able to benefit from that pricing now.
Is there any risk with this? Like let's say that the vendor doesn't want to go with the pricing because it's so off. Is there any risk that we assume, or?
There really isn't. So they've got a contract very similar to what our own bid documents would be. So they've got a contract that they bid against and they're held firm to that contract. It's the same as if we were to do it ourselves, except at a much larger scale.
Awesome. Okay. Anything else for our construction updates?
That's it.
Okay. All right. Moving forward, Norton Creek playground replacement.
So the existing Norton Creek playground is original to the building. We've continued to have a need for multiple repairs, and in some situations, there are some play features that we are beyond repair and are currently out of service. Concurrently, we have a need for some inclusive features at this playground, both as just a district initiative, district-wide to include these items in our playgrounds, but specifically at Norton Creek, we have the RISE students there that would benefit from more inclusive features. We've reviewed the existing playground with Norton Creek staff and brought a vendor through Play Illinois out on site. We've had multiple conversations and site visits with them to determine what really would be the best suited playground and features for that school. After a lot of back and forth and a lot of fun features looking at for our students, we came up with an option that would allow us to replace the entire playground, include several features that were inclusive, and also provide a mixed ground cover. So it's a combination of wood chips in some areas, as well as a solid surface, accessible flooring in other areas in the playground. After confirming design, we received a proposal in the amount of $256,727.66 from Play Illinois through the Omnia Cooperative Purchasing Agreement. One of the benefits of this specific agreement is that we can obtain up to 15% off the equipment of the playground equipment through this contract. If we were to move forward with this award, the lead times would start right away, and we anticipate having the equipment by the end of the school year for an install this summer.
I have a question. Just, do we have any other playgrounds with non-usable equipment?
To my knowledge, no.
Okay.
We continuously make repairs.
Right.
Yeah, and as needed, we buy additional parts and things like that. And in many situations, not at Norton Creek, but at other schools, we're able to lean into the park district as well, as we have a joint relationship in maintaining these. But no, Norton Creek is at a critical point here for their playground.
Thank you.
Amanda, have we used Play Illinois before, or how did we arrive at this relationship? Was that through Omnia?
It is through Omnia. I can't say for certain, but I believe that Play Illinois has been used here before. This was conversations have started with Play Illinois before I came into the district, and that's how I introduced them specifically. But the Omnia contract that they are utilizing is one that has been utilized by our park district with the district for some of our joint ventures in the past.
And how does Play Illinois stack up against other similar vendors? Do we look into that, or does Omnia do that work for us? Can you explain a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So specifically with their contract through the Burke Playground Manufacturers with Omnia, I couldn't tell you exactly how many vendors submitted proposals, but what it typically looks like is you'll get a variety of vendors that submit proposals to Omnia to be the awarded contractor. And then from those proposals, they typically select depending on the contract, maybe 4, 5, 6 vendors that are approved vendors through this contract. And they also have rankings that go along. So when Omnia receives the proposals, they go through the entire vetting process, the reference checks, and the ranking of those awarded vendors.
That sounds great. Seems very thorough. Thanks.
Consent agenda, is everybody? Okay. All right.
Can I just make a quick point real quick?
Yeah.
It dawned on me as you were talking there, Justin, one of the things, especially as we're talking about taxation and so forth, we've had discussions here at the board of a number of the things that board and administration are doing in an attempt to save money, right? We might not always see those dollar signs that are saved. And so relationships like Omnia really help us to vet additional vendors that we may not even be aware of. And so I think, we've talked a little bit about even quantifying that to some degree, because I think that would be valuable, not only for the board to recognize where we're saving money, but also for the community, right? Times are tough. It's tough to go out to the community and ask them for more money, but it would be, I think, really wise for us to showcase some of these things that we're doing that are saving costs to the district. So I know we mentioned it a while ago. I'm sure there's some kind of ongoing list of what we're doing there, but I think it would be really wise to bring that to the table at some point, just so the community can see how seriously we're taking this.
And just to answer your other question, Mr. Kusher, it looks like we did work with Play Illinois and Burke Company when we just redid the Munn Hall playground, and that was through the park district.
Awesome. All right. Moving on to the Wredling facility lounge furniture.
Sure. So this Wredling Faculty Lounge has been evaluated and under discussion for several years now with the principal and the facilities team. Multiple discussions have been had to really understand what was best to make this room a utilized space. Conversations started in years past and money was budgeted for this specific project for this year to develop a space that would be utilized by the staff there. Some of the challenges in the room currently as it stands is there's no use or areas for private space, no secure lockers for individuals like substitutes or teachers that are now beginning to share rooms. So this design that was developed really is minimal change or minimal equipment to make a major change in the space. So the new furniture that is being proposed has more of a flexible nature. It is not, won't just be for a space for the faculty to sit and eat. There were different stations here to allow for private individual work zones. It allows for flexible furniture for different small meetings to take place as needed in this space. And the changing of the furniture and layout here will really activate the space to utilize an underutilized space in the school. Additionally, as we start to have more teachers sharing classrooms, rather than having their own individual home classroom, this revised faculty lounge will provide those additional secure measures such as lockers that can be reprogrammed on a daily basis, such you'd see at a gym, take it for this period and then leave their stuff there and then take it out in a next period. And then additionally, as I mentioned, there would be some more private workstations. So if a teacher is not in their classroom for a period or two, there will be some isolated areas within the space that they would be able to get some work done. We did enlist Interiors for Business, a vendor through that is taking advantage of several different cooperative agreements through this proposal. And their complete scope of work would include furniture and casework for a total of $49,206.12. This includes both the procurement and the install efforts for this work. There was originally a bigger scope discussed with this company. However, the facilities team has decided to take on some of the efforts ourselves, and we would be doing the painting and flooring that went along with this project to save costs.
This would alleviate some of the office challenges that we've been experiencing there as we go into the kind of the.
Sure. Yeah, it's not going to alleviate everything, but it's a little relief in this space that's underutilized right now, providing that opportunity for some workstations in some private areas.
Okay. Any other questions? Consent agenda? Okay. All right. And then our last item here, the Haines-Univent Replacement.
All right, so I'm sure Univent equipment is a really fun thing to talk about, really exciting item for the end here. But as I alluded to earlier, we're getting ready to, we have our Haines project out to bid right now, but this was our final early bid item that needed to be procured prior to awarding the larger contract next month. This is a proposal for 10 new unit ventilators with condensing unit to provide both heating and cooling to the E-wing. We solicited a proposal from Thermo Systems through the Omnia Partners Cooperative Purchasing Agreement for all 10 units. The total for these units came out to $186,589. If awarded, Pepper would be the one coordinating the receiving and the storage of the units until construction began.
Questions on this one?
When Omnia provides these bids to you, do they also include their top 4 or 5 vendors that you alluded to earlier? Do they include their bids so that, and then you're just bringing this final number to us? Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So in an example like this, when it comes to equipment purchasing, it's more of a line item, almost as like a menu. So when these vendors gave their proposal several years ago for this type of equipment, they said this specific type of equipment will be this dollar amount. This will be this dollar amount. So these were, how do I explain this? These were line item pricings that were provided previously through the Omnia contract. As a district, it's up to us to select which of those awarded vendors we want to work with. So when we engage with Thermo Systems here, we select Thermo Systems as the engaged vendor for this project. Now, there are several other vendors that were awarded the same contract through Omnia that I could have gone to as well. So we do have that ability to select the specific vendor in this one contract.
And that's when you say you lean on the score or whatever the verbiage you use provided by Omnia?
Yep, absolutely.
Amanda, for that same line item?
Mhm.
Is it the same cost? So from this vendor to this vendor to this vendor?
Not always specifically, probably very close, but there are specific factors and specific markups that do change depending on the vendor that we utilize. I will say that we don't always select the, out of, let's say there were 4 vendors awarded as an example. I don't always select that top rated vendor every single time. I won't call out the names, but we've actually had issues with one vendor specifically due to lead times this past year. So that is a vendor of, HVAC equipment that I'm not working with this next summer because of the critical nature of our timeline. Mhm.
All right. I think that one goes to consent. I'll open up for any future agenda items. Okay, and we are going to adjourn here at 6:06. Do we have citizen comment? For the next, in L&T, we'll have citizen comments in that. So we're rolling right into L&T in the next 5 minutes. Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, greetings, everyone. Welcome to Learning and Teaching Committee meeting, November 27th, 2023. It is 6:15 PM. I will officially call to order the meeting here. I believe we have a couple of citizens' comments. So Mrs. McCabe, if you wouldn't mind, please reading the statement.
During the public comment period, members of the public body who wish to speak are asked to first state their name and the community in which they reside. Each individual will have up to 3 minutes to address the board on a topic of their choosing. We ask all individuals who address the board to do so with respect and civility toward others. Please note that personnel matters are sensitive and confidential. We also want to inform our speakers that all regular, special, and committee meetings are live streamed and available for viewing at any time on the district's YouTube channel. Personal information should be considered before making a statement that will be recorded and made public. While the board will not respond to today's public comment during this meeting, we are committed to listening to you to help support our work for the district and on behalf of our students, staff, families, and community members. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. McCabe. First speaker, Diana Soltis, please.
Good evening. My name is Diana Soltis. I'm a citizen of St. Charles, and I'd like to address the aggregate tax levy. I know that that dovetails with business services, but I didn't have the opportunity to speak. A 6.76% tax increase is an egregious attack on the community and its residents. There are many programs in D303 that address the underprivileged and the people who are having financial difficulties, and this hits them the hardest. So many of those things are very cyclical. You offer the program, and yet you're increasing taxes in order to continue to do that. So I would encourage things like the procurement services, really analyzing each of the programs and every aspect that the district does. I've done many budgets and I've been required to keep to them, and it's certainly possible. I'm well familiar with that. So on that 5-year budget, I'd like to propose some cuts, particularly in the area of administration. There's a lot of superfluous programs and many assumptions that are being made in this new 5-year budget. On that, the administrative services, the student services and learning and teaching have about $5 million dedicated to about 40 employees. That's an average salary of $125,000 per employee. I'm sure many of the people in this room would like to earn that salary. And I think that they really need to look at and evaluate the value that's being brought by those administrators. Every staff should be looked at. I'm held accountable for my job. I'm accountable for my goals every year. I think every staff member needs to be held accountable for those things, including achievement. If the students are to be held to it, administration and everyone else certainly should be. There are many programs like the language programs. If there are 49 languages, it's not practical that people can be taught 49 languages. English is what binds us. I speak multiple languages. I've studied abroad. I can tell you immersion is the best way to learn things. And so there's an example of a very costly program and much time, energy, and effort spent. And you're never going to please everyone. There's no doubt about that, but you will please people if you keep within budget, you don't have such exorbitant increases, and that you can focus on academics instead of all the ancillary programs that aren't necessarily benefiting the students. In fact, many of them are hurting the students. So please continue to evaluate those things. I think that's extremely important. I think that the district has to be held accountable like anyone else, and such an increase in taxes and looking at various pieces of this 5-year budget need to be analyzed before this is approved next month. Thank you.
Thank you, Diana. I'd like to call up Victoria Contreras, I believe it is.
Hello, my name is Victoria and I live in unincorporated St. Charles. I was asked to read a letter for someone who could not attend today who wanted to address the board. It is about the tax levy. I'm sorry, can you hear me? This is from Rafael Savastano. He was unable to attend, and he did email this letter to the board. So it says, "Dear members of the board and the superintendent, as a member of our community and a stakeholder in the educational well-being of our district, I am writing to express my concerns regarding the proposed school tax levy, particularly in the light of the current economic challenges faced by many of our residents. While I support the strategic vision of the district, especially focusing on improving academic achievement, I am compelled to voice my apprehension regarding the financial strain that even the modest increase in property taxes would impose on many in our community. With the current consumer price index standing at 300 plus points, the impact of inflation is palatable and burdensome for many in our community. Even a slight increase in property taxes could significantly exacerbate the financial strain on our most vulnerable residents. I urge the board to reconsider this tax increase, taking into account the economic pressure that our community is already facing. It is essential that our approach to funding education does not inadvertently place an additional burden on those who are least able to afford it. To address these financial needs, the district, without imposing further strain on our community, I propose the following alternatives. Utilization of district investments. Allocate a portion of the district's investments for essential expenditures, mitigating the need for increased taxes. Collaboration and funding. Engage with other districts for innovative funding strategies and organize district-wide fundraising events. Budget review for cost. Reduction. Conduct a thorough audit of the current budget to identify and implement cost-saving measures, prioritizing educational quality. Technical solutions for efficiency. Invest in automation and other technical solutions to reduce administrative workloads, enabling the relocation of these resources to direct educational needs. Strategic plan reevaluation. Segregate the components of the 5-year strategic plan into needs and haves and nice to have categories, focusing initially on the essential elements, delaying less critical projects until a more financially viable time. These recommendations are intended to harmonize our district's educational objectives with the financial realities of our community. By considering these alternatives, we support the district's goals while being mindful of the economic pressure faced on many of our residents. I appreciate the board's dedication to our schools and students and hope that these suggestions will be valuable in your deliberations. Thank you for your attention to these critical matters. Sincerely, Rafael Savastano. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Victoria, and thank you, Raphael. We did also receive that email, so you will be receiving a response in a timely manner. Okay, that brings us to the end of citizens' comments, and that will take us to the next item, item 2A, the Student Achievement Report. And before I hand it off to Dr. Igo, just wanted to let everybody know here that there was a ton of collaboration between board, administration, obviously staff, throughout the entire district. There are a lot of things to celebrate. There's some things for us to continue to work on because our work is never done. But this is meant to be a transparent review of where we are. How's everything going? What we continue to work on. And as always, with everything that we're tackling here at the board table, we welcome the feedback from the public, from the staff, from members. And then we'll just continue to do our level best to make this the best school district in the state and in the country. Dr. Igo?
Yeah. Thank you so very much. So this evening, we're going to talk about the Student Achievement Report. While I'm going to kind of be the voice as we talk through this, just a reminder that this is the work of everyone. You'll see most of our principals here this evening, as well as our learning and teaching staff. We've all worked together to put the report together, as well as to come together for the results that we'll have we'll talk about this evening. So as we talk about this, as we discussed at the September L&T committee meeting, the purpose of this report really is to analyze our student achievement data and really communicate that with the board and the community with really a couple of focuses in mind. One is to evaluate our curriculum and instruction. Another is to really identify what are our strengths and opportunities for growth. And then the third is really to dig into the benchmarks that we have and where are we at as we make progress towards the our 2025 goal, as well as those 2023 interim benchmarks. All right. So the outcomes for this evening is really to provide you a general overview of the information that's included in the student achievement report. And it's purposefully pulls out highlights from the report, but doesn't really give all of the information that's included in that report. So we were able to provide, like Mr. Kuchar said, provide this report to you like mid-November. So you all had the opportunity to read through that. People provided me with feedback. And then I took that feedback and updated the student achievement report. And in the student achievement report, any updates that were made are done in blue. So you can quickly and easily see where those changes are. And then to help us kind of guide the pieces of the student achievement report and connecting it back to our presentation, the bottom corner of every slide, it'll say SAR page. And in this case, it says page 4. So it really articulates so that you can easily find where's the information that we're discussing in the presentation, and then how does that information connect overall to our student achievement report. So as always, we'll be grounding our work within our commitment statement and our core values tonight. As we talk through some of the things, what this really does is allows us to leverage the commitment and the values and how we use the commitment and values to engage in our day-to-day work. The strategic priorities are that roadmap for us. These are the things that we're doing to help improve instruction along the way and student outcomes. As we proceed through the presentation this evening, our recommendations for the work that we'll be doing this school year will be attached to our strategic priorities. When we think about continuous improvement, we're focused on answering the questions of, are we making progress? And what do we do next? Whether it's we're making progress, how do we celebrate that progress and spread that progress, or we're not making progress and we need to rethink and rework our thinking. At the core of all of our work is our theory of action, and that theory of action really aligns the work that we do from the district office down to the classroom and really builds in what we call reciprocal accountability measures to ensure that we all have a clear idea of where we're going. We all have roles and responsibilities in making those things happen, and we all work together ultimately to improve student achievement. As we often ask our teachers to do, we are going to begin with the end in mind and take a look at how our students are doing once they've graduated. As you can see from the tables, overall, our District 303 graduates are prepared and successful, with most students completing a 2 or 4 year degree within 6 years of graduation from high school. And more importantly, that high percentage of students persisting into their second year of college. That's one of those benchmarks that when students persist, they're far more likely to complete their degree. The class of 2023 appears to be set up to have some of those similar successes, with 58% of students having earned early college credit and an average super SAT score at the 67th national percentile. While not included on this slide, there are concerns with the slight decline in our graduation rate. The decrease seems to be related to our pandemic and the fact that we have students who needed a little bit more time to complete those requirements. I anticipate when we look at our 5 and our 6 year graduation rates, we will be equal to the same graduation rate, a 6 year graduation rate we had prior to the pandemic. And we've already started to see that in the class of 2021 and class of 2022. Positive climate and culture is necessary to support high levels of learning for all of our students. And when we talk about a positive climate and culture, we're talking about our students having a strong sense of belonging, positive relationships between students and teachers. We measure that through a survey, a belonging survey, and a student-teacher relationship survey through Panorama, as well as reviewing our daily attendance. The climate and culture within the district continues to be positive, with students really reporting a strong sense of belonging and feeling really strong about their positive student-teacher relationships. Additionally, our average daily attendance is high. And we even had a slight increase from our previous year. And what's nice about this is there are also no discrepancies within our student group. So all of our students have an average daily attendance that is high. However, similar to national and state trends, there are definitely some current concerns as it relates to chronic absenteeism, as well as chronic truancy. This slide really kind of works to highlight the recommendations and action steps that we put in place last school year, and then compare it with the results that we have from the spring of 2023. So really trying to say, did the action steps we put in place correlate with any positive changes in student data? And if so, how did that play out? So as I mentioned previously, we had identified chronic absenteeism as an area of concern, and we had added some additional structures to support buildings and monitoring and responding to that chronic absenteeism. As you can see, the recommendations had a slight impact on reducing the overall chronic absenteeism, especially at the middle school level. As we think about and that focus we had on building a culture of belonging, we continue to see students reporting high levels of a sense of belonging and positive student-teacher relationships. So I feel like that there's some correlation between the things we did.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I don't know, I'm challenged with the word stable at high school when we're at 30% absenteeism.
Give me just a second. Let me get to the next slide.
It's a.
Yes.
Just let me interject. When would you like us to ask questions?
I think if I could do the whole presentation and then that might be helpful, but if there are questions you feel like you need, I'm happy to answer them kind of along the way. I'm open to either or. So this slide here really talks about now that we have our data and we have that data and we're able to analyze it in relationship to our action steps. What are we doing this school year in order to take and move things forward? And I'm going to agree with you, Mr. Lentz, that while we had a slight impact, it wasn't nearly enough in terms of really working through our chronic absenteeism, and that we really need to become a little bit more clear on what are the reasons that we're experiencing here in District 303. We need to have a really opportunity to investigate those evidence-based practices over time as to what are they. And I think it's important to acknowledge that what might have been in place and what research might have been pre-pandemic might look different post-pandemic, given the high levels that we're seeing. So we need to really investigate that.
Oh, sorry. Just to dive a little bit into the absenteeism. Are there any tools or other things that admin feels that they need in order to do better intervention on these, right? If we're getting, and I know that we've recently taken steps within the last year or so to kind of clean up the codes and everything else that we're using to track absenteeism, right? So positive step there. Are there any things that, as we start to see a trend in absenteeism, I'm assuming that building leadership is looking at these things on a regular basis. What are we doing to proactively outreach either to parents or to guidance counselors or to anybody else to start stemming this tide?
Sure. So there's a couple of things. One is I think we do need to spend some time. We need to get a committee together. We need to really think through like what is our root cause? But we also need to be responding to the students that we have in front of us. And we need to be thinking about that down two lines. One of them is what are we proactively doing to support kids and not experiencing becoming chronically absent, as well as how do we respond to our students who are already kind of living in that world. And I think in terms of what we're doing specifically this year, we've got some systems and structures where we can monitor attendance, and we can monitor that attendance when it goes over that 30% within a week, within a month, so that we're able to say, oh, that was just an illness or that wasn't, right? So those are some systems and structures that allow us to do that work. But ultimately, each team has got to come together. And one of our recommendations is that they really look at each of those students. We make sure that we have a plan that's individualized to support the student and helping to turn those things around.
I mean,
one more second. Overall, we also are trying to alert families to the idea that this is how many days you've missed so far, and here's that impact that it has on instruction, particularly at high school.
So 2 questions. What's the alert mechanism that we're doing to families? Is it through hack? Is it what's the alert mechanism that we're doing today?
Say that for me one more time.
What is the alert mechanism that we are doing to families?
Sure. So it's a combination, I think, depending on where students fall. It could be a letter, could be an email to parents, it could be a phone call to parents, or it could be a meeting, depending on what that chronic absenteeism looks like and how well students are responding.
Okay, second question.
Mhm.
I'm concerned if we're waiting until they hit the 30% threshold. I'm assuming that we have data much sooner than
We
that.
aren't waiting for the 30. As we're seeing the numbers tick up, that's when we might send a letter to a parent to let them know. If that's not turning things around, we might then pick up the phone and have that phone call, but we're not waiting for it to go. But it's when we see 2 or 3 days in a row.
Okay,
Am I making sense?
yes.
Okay.
So if I can jump in here just because I had a question written down, since we're asking about it now. You had brought up the idea that we've cleaned up some codes and things. So when we've done that, I guess what I want to know is this essentially an apples to apples comparison because we've kind of changed maybe a little bit of the way we're counting the absences?
I would say that the data that we have for last year is an apples to apples comparison. The data that we will be using moving forward, or like you receive in your, in our
The dashboard.
dashboard, thank you, is not apples to apples because we cleaned up some codes.
Sorry, we ask your question.
Well, I have several questions related to the data. So on the table, it's 2022 attendance. So is that actually fall and spring for 2022? What is this period?
Oh, that's a good call. I think that's my mistake. It should say 2023 attendance.
Okay, so this is the same larger cohort, if you will, as we're using for like the graduation rates, you know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
They're the same,
Last year's data.
right? So that would be 2022, 2023. So it's the
Yes.
same group as the class of 23.
Yes, it is.
Okay, my other question is for chronic truancy, is that included in chronic absenteeism?
No, they're 2 separate things. So chronic absenteeism is when you've reached the threshold of 10% or more days out of school, regardless of the reason why. So if I happen to get strep throat and I'm out for 5 or 6 days, that's going to count towards chronic absenteeism. Chronic truancy is when the absence is unexcused.
Okay, does chronic absenteeism include excused then as well?
It does.
So it doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter why you
Even
were
if
out.
somebody's taking the 5 additional mental health days
Correct.
added, that all goes into that 10%
It
or
all fits
more.
into that period, yes.
Okay. Okay.
So I guess
what-
I'm confused. I'm sorry.
What did you mean by it's different from what we see on the dashboard?
Because we updated the codes,
Okay,
so that it's cleaner in terms of making sure we have a clear understanding of absences and why. And those codes were, we implemented those codes starting this school year. So that data is tracking what's happening this school year, which is different than how we tracked data last school year.
So just to clarify, what we have in front of us is an autopsy,
Yep.
Yes,
that from last year.
that is correct.
The continuous improvement action steps, they started as soon as you had action to do. So in August or,
Correct.
so that's why the absentee or the attendance of the dashboard, you've been keeping track of that since school started. What we have in front of us is
Last year's stop data.
oh,
that is
so you're
correct.
just saying the timing of it?
Correct, that's what I'm
Okay,
saying.
yeah, I got it.
I just want to clarify a quick point here. So district chronic absenteeism, that 23%. And then the chronic truancy, that 6% is not part of the 23%?
That is correct.
Okay.
It's 2 separate things.
There's a likelihood. I'm not likely. different reasons to be in the bucket.
Oh, I hear what
Whether
you're saying.
Unexcused or not, you're always in the calls.
That's, okay, thank you. I was not very clear on that. Thank you.
Okay, that was
That makes
my-
more sense. You're right.
Okay, so it is a subset.
Yes, it is.
Truancy is a subset.
Yes, it is. My fault.
Okay, well, thanks for the discussion on that. Well, I'm glad though we did make that distinction between absenteeism and truism. And I think we'll all be excited to see some of those evidence-based practices, both for preventative measures, things that we can do on the front end, and then certainly responsive measures that we can do to help moving forward.
And maybe in the report, for that graph, is there a way to make show the difference between the chronic truancy and the chronic
You mean
absenteeism?
put in a definition?
Something, or a little
I can
asterisk
put
that
it
it
in a-
defines, so people will be on the same page. Thanks.
Yep, I can totally do that.
So to clarify, my reason for asking is that when I look at that 30% that Mr. Lentz referenced, if the 9% was not a subset of that, would make that dramatically worse. So that's why I wanted that clarity there.
And then Dr. Igo, so on the overall results for spring 2023, when you say there's a decline, are we saying that's an improvement or it's worse?
It's an improvement, right? Because we want that number to go down. So there's 2% less kids. I need to have this in front of me. I apologize.
Decline in absenteeism.
Yeah.
That's what that is.
Yes, so if it was 30%, it's now 28%. I don't have the number directly in front of me. We want that number going down.
Okay.
Good. Okay. All right, so college, career, and life readiness requires that students have literacy, numeracy, and content knowledge to think critically and problem solve. We measure student progress towards mastery of grade level standards with the state assessments, which is IAR at the elementary and middle school, and SAT at the high school, and science is the Illinois Science Assessment. As a result, the district has established on-track indicators for ELA and math proficiency at key points in the K-12 journey. As Mrs. McCabe mentioned, while the states just released this data, we actually received this data in the summertime. And we've been utilizing this data and analyzing this data since we received it. And our schools have had the data and had opportunities to engage and use it to support their school improvement as well as professional learning. So first, let's take a look at ELA proficiency. Overall, during the 22-23 school year, we saw great gains in the percentage of students meeting and exceeding standards. This slide highlights some of the successes of the schools had, as well as some student cohorts that we saw some great growth in. While not on our slides, but not on this slide specifically, it should be noted that the overall success we saw in ELA was also seen with increases in proficiency levels within our student groups, where we typically see discrepancies in achievement. So really what we're saying is when we start to see overall progress in our tier 1 instruction, that leads to progress for our student groups that have been traditionally not performing as well. So this table provides the IAR and SAT proficiency levels across time. If you read the table horizontally, you can follow a cohort of students over time. This allows us to monitor how a cohort is growing from year to year, as well as allows us to evaluate how well are we adjusting and responding to the students, the unique students within each subgroup. As you can see from the cohorts, our proficiency levels continue to grow, with the class of 2031 and 2028 making some pretty significant gains in their proficiency levels, as well as the classes of 24 or 25 experiencing some negative growth. As we read the table vertically, we can follow grade level scores year over year, and this allows us to look at our curriculum, evaluate the impact of our curriculum, as well as evaluate how our instruction is working. And this is how we set those 2025 goals and those interim 2023 benchmarks. So I kind of have the boxes around the areas where we've identified 3, 5, 8, and 11 Those are the benchmarks that we're following over time. And as we look through there, we really do see some nice growth year over year for our students, which really indicates that we have a pretty strong evidence-based curriculum and that it's starting to move our students in the correct direction. We met our benchmarks for grade 5 and grade 8. We did not meet them for 3 or 11. But what I'd like to point out in grade 3 is that this is the highest level of proficiency we've seen in grade 3 since we transitioned to new standards. And when you look at kind of the difference between from last year's scores to this year's score, you start to see some pretty significant gains. So we really are feeling like we are in the right place at the right time. So this table highlights the action steps that we took last year for high school. And then how did that fare out in our results? So our recommendations last year is really focused in on helping supporting the implementation of that new curriculum, increasing some use of formative assessments, and then monitoring progress and using the PLC process to gain a common understanding of what each of those standards meant or what proficiency looks like. While the overall student achievement is less than expected, English 9 and 10 curriculum appears to be aligned and is having a positive impact on student learning, although the impact isn't quite what we would like it to be. There's also that we've seen in those grade 11 scores we've seen some decline there. We had the opportunity to really look at our comparable districts as well as our aspirational districts. And we do see some similar patterns with that particular group of students who have yet in that group across all of our districts to make the gains that they had seen pre-pandemic or return to some of those pre-pandemic levels. So this table really highlights what we're going to focus on or what we are focusing on this year for continuous improvement, and then what are those action steps that we really would like to take. Since we didn't have that expected growth that we were really hoping to see, we did take a deeper dive into the data and kind of reviewed our scores both year over year as well as by cohort over time. And as we really started to dig in, what we were starting to see is that our scores were kind of getting stuck. So we're seeing the same score at 9 and 10, which really indicates to us that as texts are becoming more complex, students aren't able to take those skills and use them in more complex text, which then alerted us to that's an area that we need to evaluate and take a look at. We need to take a look to make sure that we've got complex, rigorous texts that are happening in our English courses as well in our content area courses. And then we also need to make sure that the content or the rigor is increasing as students move through our English courses, like from English 9 to English 10 to English 11. So we use kind of the same process to analyze the K-8 data in relationship to those recommendations in our action steps. The recommendations here really focused on increasing the time students spent in informational text, gaining a strong common understanding of what proficiency looks like, and then focusing on and responding to reading through writing. Overall, those action steps are correlated with positive outcomes for our student learning. Specifically, we believe those overall increases is directly related to the work that we did in responding to reading through writing. And that really was how we all came together from the district to principal leadership and building leadership to PLCs to work together to identify what we needed to do, identify what the data was telling us, create that common understanding, and build some of those things over time. The reason this is so important is we know that if students don't meet on the written expression portion of the IAR, then they can't meet in the overall ELA portion. So it was really important that we spent the time and focused our time and energy there. Additionally, we are seeing that the curriculum resource and our professional learning that we've focused on phonics instruction is having a positive impact on student learning. And so again, when those foundational skills are strong, when students leave us in first and second grade, we are then really able to continue to push the complex text and the rigor across time. While we're pleased with the outcomes in ELA, we are always focused on continuous improvement. We've adopted a high quality resource that's aligned with our standards and evidence-based practices and the science of reading. It's important that we continue to support teachers in the implementation of this new curriculum as well as focusing on ensuring all our students are receiving instruction using grade level text. That includes our students who might even be behind. It's very important that we continue there.
Oh, on this one, how much do we think that the curriculum change impacted the third graders?
Significantly. I think it was a combination of, well, we're there for that particular group of third graders. They were one of the first groups to have, they started the phonics program in first grade. So they came in with some pretty strong foundational skills that we hadn't seen in the past. Additionally, we always want to replicate work that we find is being successful, and that writing, that responding to reading through writing was really impactful, and we want to continue to do that. But where we saw the impact was 4th and 5th grade, and now we want to replicate that at 2nd and 3rd grade. While we had conversations around it, we need to be more intentional and more focused. I do want to say the resource that we have purchased is, we purposely looked for a resource that was going to connect the reading through writing. So there's much more opportunities for students to engage in that learning. All right, and I move into math. Any questions on reading? Nope. Okay. Okay, so as we take a look at our math, we didn't see the same gains in our proficiency levels in math that we saw in ELA, but generally speaking, there are high levels of proficient. We continue to see some high levels of proficiency, and we had some nice gains at the middle school level. This chart is similar to ELA. When you read it horizontally, we get to look at cohorts over time. And then when you read it vertically, we get to look at our grade levels over time to determine curriculum and instruction. And when we're reading it horizontally, we're looking to see how are we responding to students appropriately over time. Again, you can see we had some really nice gains in 7th grade and in 9th grade. Those are really positive. But the one I really want to point out is grade 6. You may remember that last year, this was really an area that was hard for us. And we had seen year over year a decline in scores as kids transitioned from 5th to 6th grade. There was a pretty significant decline. So while there wasn't a gain per se for the cohort, we did see that we didn't lose any ground in 6th grade for the first time. And when we look at all our comparable districts, we are one of the few, we might be the only, that didn't experience a decline as students transitioned from 5th to 6th grade. So we're feeling pretty good about that, about the work that we did there and the impact it had on students.
What was the decline previously?
Let's see if I can.
So I was just going to ask the same thing. So if you look at 6th grade from 2024 down, though, you can see where I think I'm reading this right, that there is 50% for the class of 2024, it was 50% for and down. So you can see that grade 10.
Yeah, so if you look at the class of 2024, if you look at their 5th grade score was 52% was proficient. When they transitioned to 6th grade, it was 50%. And then it pops back up in 7th grade at 58%. But then if you look at the class of 2025, you see 56% in 5th grade and then a drop to 49%. And then it gets a little more complicated because we've got some COVID time in there, but the class of 2028 was 53 to 46. So you can see there's a pretty significant decline. So the fact that we didn't see that decline this year, and we were able to hold steady. And what we also saw some pretty strong growth in one middle school over another. So we know that we need to expand some of those practices to both of our middle schools. So this table again is going to highlight kind of our action steps that we took last year and then lay it alongside our overall results from the spring of 2023. This is focusing in on high school. As we review the data in connection with the recommended action steps from last year, we see that we did not have the impact on instruction and student growth that we were hoping to see. And with the exception of our freshman class, we did see some nice growth there. The recommendations and those action steps focused on successful implementation of curriculum and embedding some of those evidence-based practices within the resource. It's clear that this is an issue that goes deeper than just making sure we have a guaranteed and viable curriculum. And we have yet to really identify what is that root cause of what's happening. So as we think about, well, what does that mean as we plan this school year? How do we want to respond to that? And really, as we started to dig into the data and started to analyze data, as you know, anytime you analyze data, you should have more questions than you have answers. And what we were finding is we just did not have enough data at that high school level to answer some of the questions that were rising to the top. And that's just because of the kind of the structure of some of those things. And so we really felt like we needed to reach out to an outside consultant. And so we reached out to Shapen Hall, who did our quantitative work under our equity audit to help us gain a big picture look at our data from K-12. And he's really going to help us look at our data as kids transition from 5th grade to 6th grade and from 8th grade to high school. He'll look at our scores. He'll also look at grades to see if we can't start to see, like, let's look, here's where we go next to dive deep to see if we can't identify what the area of concern is. Additionally, we'd like to start to look at some commercially available summative informative assessments. So in previous to this, right, like we have iReady at the elementary and secondary or middle school level that provides us again with additional information that allows us to say, well, what are the subtest scores here compared to here? Are we seeing the same things? We can start to really get deep into where the issues or the concerns are. And as we look at that, we haven't had that at the high school level. We had a conversation with our with an ISB consultant who indicated that that is beginning to change at the high school level. So we'd like to really look at the commercially available assessments to decide if there is one of those that can really help us so that we have some more information to help us really make sure kids are on track and knowing how to identify and step in and address the issues that we're seeing at the high school level.
Can I just back up for a quick second here? Because I was looking at the two charts, I should say. And I'm noting that 7th and 9th in both math and ELA, there were significant increases.
Yes.
Is there, I guess my first question is there, do you see a reason that would account for those significant increases kind of over and above most of the others?
Absolutely, yes. So in the executive summary of that, we did point out that they had some really nice growth. Believe that really has to do with the kind of diving in and really kind of embracing some of our PLC practices, not fully implemented in the way that we have started this year, but people were definitely looking at how do I respond to students? What does that look like? And at grade 7, they really did report some nice work there.
And then the not so easy question maybe is at grade 4, we had in ELA a gain of 18% in ELA and a loss of 4% in math year over year. That just seems kind of dramatic.
Yeah, so I definitely think that the gains that we saw in ELA are related to the reading and writing work that we did or responding to reading through writing, right? That was we saw really nice gains in their written expression subtest score that we then saw that kind of pulled its way through. As we really dove into the 4th grade math, we did see that there's there's a couple of areas within couple of areas really within the geometry progression, as well as there's the probability and statistics. So that's 7th and 8th grade. I'm sorry. Geometry progression and structural practice. I'm sorry. I was looking to see. I knew I called it out. That we think we need to evaluate and adjust. We think there might be something that's not quite right there. So that's part of our work this year.
And that is Mrs. McCabe and I have talked about that very year and found a great deal of agreement on the need for that year in math to excel. So.
And so just to clarify, so the grade 4 teachers, they've had this data, they're digging in their PLCs. This is one piece of many, I imagine, on the geometry. and what kind of practices they need to change. Assuming.
Yeah.
So tell me if I'm way off. They're looking at their instructional practices in that area of math particular.
Well, I think I would say our math specialists are
Okay.
currently have been looking through that data and identifying, is it something in our scope and sequence? Is it something is in evidence-based practices? And then those math specialists are now working with our grade level teams to then move those practices forward, depending on what they decide.
This could be just a very simple, stupid question. Sometimes geometry is taught after the test.
True.
Is that?
Could be.
So, but that would be the case, if we're talking about the similar scope and sequence, that would be the same year to year, right?
I've heard teachers,
Yeah.
having worked at ISB, and when we would look at why certain grade levels, we would hear from schools, we don't do that.
Yeah.
We take the test in March, we teach geometry in April. So I just.
And didn't we have a fairly recent change in some of the curriculum there at that level?
I would say we're probably 4 or 5 years old now.
Okay, I couldn't
Yeah.
remember how long ago, so.
Yeah,
Years run together sometime.
fair enough.
Christine, quick point of clarification. So obviously we've worked with Chapin Hall before, and I think I sent you a question about this also. Coming out of their review, are we hoping to have an action plan from them? Have they done similar work with other districts to identify these
Absolutely.
challenges? Will they be giving recommendations to chairs, or what will that relationship look like?
What will that
please?
look like? For sure. So he'll take a look and work through those pieces and do the analysis. And then within our contract, what we have is for him to come in and actually work with our teachers. I think it's 3 times to kind of walk through, explain the data, answer their questions, kind of understand, right? Like we always say we can talk about correlation, right? But we really need to get into the qualitative stuff to understand what is actually happening and why. And so he'll use those 2 pieces. But he will be available to work with our teachers, our department chairs, our math teachers, to answer those questions and help them understand the data and make decisions together about how do we best move this forward.
What I'm
So
hearing
when
there
are-
is.
I'm sorry. go
Oh,
ahead.
just one final thought is, so they'll drive some of the PLC work, or maybe some changes that we may
For sure.
be making to our PLC work.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So when will outcomes from this work actually be implemented? What is the timeline that you're?
Yeah, that's a great question. I can't answer that specifically because we're still in the process, but we might be able to implement some this year, but I would probably anticipate that they'll come next year. We'll be able to talk about our entire scope and sequence and if we need to make changes in that. But meantime, we know we have students that are in front of us and we need to be responding to that. And so we have upped, like, as we've done for everybody, increased the evidence of student learning, that PLCs are looking at that every 5 days so that they're constantly checking in on where kids are at. Are they with us? Are they not with us? And then we're really working and supporting them and how do I adjust instruction to meet those needs? But if it's something that's more than that, like we just need someone to help us really dive in and understand if it has something to do with the way we have a scope and sequence or the way we've got a mathematical pathway.
But realistically, nothing's going to happen with that until maybe the 25-26 school year. You're not going to be able to adjust high school pathways.
Oh,
overnight.
100% true.
So that's what I'm
100%.
talking about.
I'm sorry,
So
I
we're looking
misunderstood.
We're looking at least another 2 years out on the math.
What I would say is on the University of Chicago analysis, I think that we'll get that late this year, but I would continue to say what we're doing at our PLC level with our department chairs, that work that is driven by the standards, the essential standards, that work is ongoing today. And that's where we have to continue getting better. So there is not a stop and wait for University of Chicago. It is that will inform our work, but we're continuing our day-to-day work with our department chairs working with our teachers, our principals working with all of them to make sure that we're looking at evidence of student learning based off of the essential standards with the state assessment is around. So that work is ongoing.
And I appreciate that. When will we start to be able to see results related to that? Because here's what I get concerned about and frustrated, frankly, because in the report, we've talked about the current graduating class for 23 and 24, they've declined 5 years in a row. And I don't want another 5 years to go by for these kids.
That's fair.
So,
I would anticipate that we see growth. That this time next year that we're going to see growth. Because why do I believe so much in this PLC? Because it's the power of our teachers, it's the power of our principals, it's the power of learning teaching, working together to do this work. So I 100% hear it, because our students don't have that same ninth grade again next year. They've got it this year. We've got to do it right by our students right now, today. And that's why every one of these leaders are in this room to be a part of this work, to move this thing forward. It is not a wait and see. It's let's use University of Chicago, but we're going to continue the hard work of looking at student learning from 5 days prior, getting into our PLCs and making adjustments. My goal is that we do see improvement next year, that we're not waiting 2-3 years down the road. And I know every one of these leaders in this room that I'm looking at, that is their goal as well, that we improve every grade level each year. And I think where, just a little bit on my own soapbox here, I think the structures and systems we're putting in place in my 1 year and 5 months, those pieces will continue to make a difference, because it's relying on educators. When I say educators, it's our leaders, it's our learning teaching team, it's our teachers in the classroom doing this work each day. But for us as a district, we have to continue to drive this work is really expecting that our teachers and our administrators in our district office are all looking at evidence of student learning and making adjustments. When we're seeing things that are not directly aligned to the standards, when we're seeing where kids are struggling, where we're making changes in the moment, we know this practice will create the greatest amount of change if we stay true to the process. We've got to continue working this process. We'll get better with the University of Chicago's information, but our educators, our leaders at the building and district office, if we stay to the process, we will see results like we've seen at the K-8 level. I really believe that.
and I appreciate that. And I think where I'm also coming from is last spring, we talked about when we would start seeing results from the PLCs, even this year. So I'm curious on the timing and when we're going to start being able to see that.
Great question. So just as a reminder, really started the PLC work last January. Our teachers really started touching the PLC work this September. Right. So I believe, I'm looking at amazing leaders across the room and they're like, stop looking at me. That where they're going to lead that work, we're going to see differences next year. I'm not going to sit here and tell you the exact number, but I know we're going to see results because of the people that we have leading our buildings, to the people in the learning teaching office.
And maybe I walked away with a different perception. I thought that we would, as a board, be able to see interim results before another year from now.
Yeah, that one will be next year. So I apologize. So we're in the process of creating those common assessments at some levels, mainly in the ELA and math areas. And it's why one of the recommendations at the high school level is to really jump into purchasing some formative common assessments at the high school level. So we'll have those starting to be put in place, but next year, that's the year that the board will really see on that ongoing basis, those common assessments coming back to the board, like we heard Janelle Keating speak about 2-3 months ago from her district, where the board will see something similar to what they saw in White River on a regular basis next year with those common assessments.
Okay, so we won't see any interim results this year.
Not on our common assessments.
Will we see interim results on anything this year?
Yeah, iReady. So, but again, that's a K-8 model.
Right.
It's not a high school model. That's why we just don't have as much at the high school that we do at the K-8 level. And that's why we really believe we have to invest in another tool to get us that information. Because really it's PSAT, it's SAT, and we're limited to be able to dive into what Christine Dave Shazar and many others, like be able to rip apart the data. There's only so much data to rip apart and tell us the story to where we're going. We're getting closer. We are getting closer. I know it's not where we're at, but I'm with you. I don't want to see students not succeeding in D303. That's not where we're going to be. We're going to continue moving forward.
I just want to lean into like the work. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Lance, go ahead.
Yeah, just to get a little bit better understanding of what Chapin Hall is doing for us, right? So we said we don't have the data currently. Can you elaborate a little bit on what are they doing? Are they taking a look at it versus other district? What's happening?
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I wasn't super clear and I apologize. I was saying as we were looking through the data, we were struggling to see some of those, to really get deep into the scope and sequence. And like we've done at elementary where we were clearly like, something's not right in second grade. We dove in, we were able to be in that geometry sequence, which we tend to often think not to spend a lot of time with, actually was the basis for fractions. So we really needed to, we had enough data to allow us to do that. We don't have that type of data at the high school is what I was trying to articulate out. But what he will do for us is really, it's about how he analyzes the data and then takes a look at not only what is the data telling us, how can we use grades to also weigh that through and then start to talk about, and then what's the instruction that's happening and how is that maybe impacting this type of piece. So he's going to be able to help us think about another way to analyze the data in order to be more instructionally focused with the data that we currently have. Did I help?
Can I piggyback off your question for a
Yeah,
moment?
please.
Because I found myself thinking about this a little bit as well, especially since these folks are experts in this, and I remember chatting with him quite a bit. And so maybe coming out of that, naturally, there's probably going to be some, like you said, a framework or something that we can move along with, but perhaps there's ways that we can be more agile. Perhaps there's ideas that they have that when these interventions don't work immediately, we can pivot quickly so that we can start to see more real time or immediate results when, we're hopeful that an intervention will work, and probably not the right word for it, but we're hopeful that a process will work and then maybe it doesn't. And where can we pivot? Where have other successful districts done that? Who have they consulted similarly? Because I'd love to know those things. That way things don't work out. We're not seeing the results we want. We pivot quickly.
Yeah.
We implement those, strategies, and then we can start to see more of those immediate results so that the parents who are seeing their kids leaving the district in a year or two can also see those improvements. That we're
100%
hopeful
agree with you.
that we'll see.
And what I want to point out is to really think about that sixth grade work that we did last year, where we were able to, we didn't change much. What we changed was we helped the teachers understand, how do I build those formative assessments? How am I responding to student data? How do I make sure that everything's connected, and how do I change? And we did really see some strong changes and some positive changes in outcomes. So while it feels like I'm saying we're not doing much, by really focusing in on that evidence of student learning and showing people how to respond to that evidence of student learning, I really do feel like we will continue to see an increase in the kids who are proficient.
So I'm going to go out on a little limb here. We have two strong cohorts in math that should be from that level going into the next grade.
Mm-hmm.
Do our teachers who have these kids this year see an impact of what happened last year? There's often a chance that they never talk to each other. They don't have those opportunities to articulate across grade levels, across schools and all of that. I would think that our current eighth grade class should be sailing, and we should have evidence of that, since what they did in seventh grade, they performed outstanding on the IAR. The problem with an autopsy, and especially one that is months old, is the board is late to the game. You aren't. You guys are doing work. We just don't have any other evidence of what's current.
Sure.
And I totally get that the high school, it's been a problem for decades at the high school. I mean, Mr. McNally can probably tell you, he can see when kids come in, and I can tell what they've had before and after, but the board doesn't get to see that. So it is frustrating to not have that current data. So I'm just wondering, in the conversations that are going on, as we see a cohort of kids, eighth grade, I assume both middle schools, we should be singing hallelujah. They're coming in with having accomplished a lot in 7th grade.
Yes.
For middle school, that's amazing, I think.
Well, here's what I didn't say, and I'm gonna celebrate this, is again, when we look at our comparable districts, our middle school scores are the highest of all of our districts. And they are the highest at 6th grade, they are the highest at 7th grade, and they are second at 8th grade. So yes, they should definitely be seeing that and feeling the difference in the skills that kids are bringing to the table.
So when they transition to high school and we have a 9th grade, 10th grade class that also scored high, we should be hearing that that makes it easier for the teacher, or easier is the wrong word.
Yep.
These kids are coming in higher. So
They're
should,
coming in with the skills much more secure
yes,
than
that's a
they
better
had seen
term.
in the
Yeah.
past. Yes.
So it sounds like we've got a couple of strong cohorts coming our way.
Yes, but I think we also have strong curriculum and like, I don't want to say it's a cohort of kids. It's the way in which we've prepared them to interact with the content.
And that's what I meant, that the procedures
yes,
that we're
I'm sorry.
implementing are becoming effective for those
Yes,
student groups. And
yes.
we should, to Mrs. McCabe's point, we should see that indicated year over
Year.
year.
Yes,
as
we
those
should.
students progress.
Yes, we should, for sure. I've absolutely lost what I was talking about. Did I talk about K-8?
Okay.
25. So I'm going to talk about what we're going to do. Yes, for K-8. Again, we are pleased with our K-8 outcomes. And we really want to continue that work in 6th grade. We want to help share those practices across middle schools. We definitely have an opportunity for that. We've also identified areas of concern within our scope and sequences that need to be evaluated, and then if necessary, make some changes along the way. Additionally, at grade 2, using our iReady data, we really have found that we have a group of kids, those kids that score at the mid to above grade level in the fall and winter are not growing at a rate at which we would like to see them grow. And so what we've discovered really there is that we've got an opportunity to compact our curriculum and increase kids' opportunities to engage in some 3rd grade level math at a sooner rate. So that's something that we're going to try to look at and put into place kind of moving forward. And then finally, we've got science. This is the Illinois Science Assessment that's administered in grades 5, 8, and 11. And it measures proficiency on grade level standards, which are aligned to the next generation science standards. Overall, we are very pleased with the high levels of proficiency students are demonstrating in science. So we have had a change in format and content over the years for the ISA, which only allows us to compare data between the 22 and the 23 school years. When students are assessed on their science content knowledge, they're also assessed on their ability to apply that knowledge in multiple ways, including in writing. And then they are assessed on their abilities as it relates to physical, life, earth, and space science. Overall, we have pretty high levels of proficiency, with grade 8 showing the highest improvement as well as the highest levels of proficiency over time. So this table again talks about what we are going to be doing this school year. You'll notice that we don't have what did we do last school year and how did that impact. And the reason for that is that we did not receive this data last year in a timely manner, which allowed us to analyze it and then make recommendations for how we were going to move forward. But this year, we did take the time to take a look at what that data is telling us as we move forward. We have got the CAI process in the development stage at the high school level. And really what we're looking to do is to develop and really understand what's happening in the middle school curriculum that's getting the results that we're receiving. Because again, when we look at comparable districts, we look at our aspirational districts, we are scoring as well. We are in the middle as it relates to our aspirational districts and towards the top of our comparable districts. So we really want to understand what is in that curriculum and what's getting those results so that we can begin to repeat that over time. As well as really helping teachers kind of understand the new Illinois learning standards, those new generation science standards are complex and require a lot of understanding. So really helping teachers understand how they all work together to move student learning. And then we have our career and college and career readiness indicators. That really, while ELA, math and science proficiency is important, it's equally important to monitor students as they transition between levels. And then to ensure an access to and achievement in advanced classes kind of along the way, and making sure students are earning early college credit. So as you take a look at our college and career readiness indicators, you'll see that they're rather strong. But of course, there's always places we can grow. In regards to enrollment in advanced classes at the middle school level, we are continuing to see an increase in the percent of students participating in advanced and accelerated math courses. We're definitely on track to meet that 2025 goal for math, completing algebra prior to entering high school. And we started to see an increase in our AT ELA students beginning with our current sixth graders in middle school. So we met our interim benchmark for enrollment in advanced classes at the middle school level. Overall, there was an increase in students' performance on our AP exams, with performance definitely moving upward, as evidenced by the percentage of students earning a 3 or better at a 5-year high, and a 12% increase in the number of students earning a score of 5. Additionally, we met that 2023 interim benchmark for early college credit. Students appear to be transitioning well into middle school and high school, as evidenced by the 6th grade GPA and the 9th grade on track data. We met the 6th grade GPA interim benchmark, but we have not met the 9th grade on track benchmark.
Could we just go back for a second to the AP test scores?
Yeah.
So last year's class, or in the year of 2023, 27% of our kids got a 5. Am I reading that correctly?
You are.
Compared to the year before, that's quite a growth.
It is.
So and this one, I know we had a significant drop, right? Or a decent drop in the total enrollment. What does enrollment look like? And I know this is post-mortem, right? What does enrollment in AP look like this year?
I would have to gather some data and get back to you on that. I don't have that in front of me. But while the numbers are down, when you look at how our enrollment has declined, it's pretty similar. The percentage is similar, yeah.
Okay.
Kids enrolled.
Because I know we had that action item of dual credit versus AP and what's so.
Christine, while we have a moment, can you also remind the public where they can see a more robust breakdown, exam by exam, mean and median and so forth?
You got that. Yep. Actually, in the appendix of the student achievement report, there is you can click on a link that will take you to all of our AP scores by district, by school, by class, and it breaks it down by, it's compared to the national scores. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You can see who scored percentage, what percentage, as well as mean, median, mode.
Are we gonna have, we used to in the past, we've had an AP specific report. Are we gonna have that through L&T at some point in the future? I mean, we did it was really an entire, that we dedicated the entire evening to. It was a subject item AP, not just part of the student achievement report.
Yeah,
I mean, we're happy to do that. It would have to be, I mean, we can either do the scores that came in, or we could do in August, once the scores from this current school year are in. Do you see what I'm saying? Could either do it sometime in the spring, but those would be last year's scores, or we could wait to August when we will have this year's scores, and we can add that in.
And perhaps there's an opportunity to see if there's improvement even from semester to semester, from this year's cohort to next year's with that data.
All the tests are in the spring.
Oh, and so it wouldn't be until the following spring that we'd be able to see it.
Yeah.
Well, then I think to Mr. McNally's point, maybe we do evaluate that data this spring and
I'd like to see that.
take a little bit deeper of a dive into it. I mean, we already have all the information, right?
We can talk about last year's scores, yes, this spring, but then we might want to add it to our August one. So we're not quite so far in the rear.
Don't
Yeah,
forget, we
no.
did a huge deep dive into last year's scores. So
Yeah.
I'd rather do it in August when we have this year, so we can see what the outcomes are that we've asked for, right? I mean, we had a bunch of feedback
Like,
on
we'd see
that.
some improvement.
Yeah.
Why not both?
You're a glutton for punishment, Mr. McNally.
We
Um,
can do both if that would, absolutely, but
I
we've
mean, we've got
already
the
done
data,
it.
so
It's
there.
it's in your hands and we did it earlier, but we can do it again. So we'll just plan to run it through, in the, when do you think?
And if I
Can I
can,
get back to you on that? I kind of need to look at the entire calendar, to make sure we have, like, I work really hard to not overwhelm us at any one night, so. But I can definitely get back to you on when.
and then I'd have one other question that was from way back at the beginning, and I think we're starting to move away from that kind of data, so. We have in there our super score average for the SAT. Do we have our non-super score average somewhere? Is that in the appendix somewhere or?
It is not, but it's something I can
Okay.
add if that is something you all are interested in.
I would be interested in seeing that, yeah.
So when you say non-super score, I'm assuming what you're asking for is the state data, because that would be the only test that all kids
Yeah.
would take. Okay.
I'm looking for the data that indicates, I'm not looking for they took the test and then they took it again and taken the two and making a super score. What is our average when they take that test? So yes, I
Are you-
guess probably.
I need a
What's your
specific time.
what would you like your baseline to be, Mr. McNally? Do you want it to be the April test that's given at the high school, or because the kid, like, what's their baseline that they should use? or
Well,
their
I think
measure?
that the one where the majority of the kids are taking the test in April.
Okay,
So it's the state.
because a lot of them take it,
Yeah.
multiple times, so
Yeah.
I guess it would be challenging for them to know which one to pull.
Thank you. Yeah, I can only pull. That's one I can absolutely pull. The
Yeah.
information's on the state report card, but I can pull that into this report as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it doesn't, it seems like it would do something, it's probably data we have somewhere. I just didn't see it on this report, so.
That's the same one that we said that if they take it again, there's that chance that they improve their score by like 15 points, right? So, okay.
And the score you have indicates that. Yeah. Okay.
Lost where I am.
And also just on that, we had a shockingly low number of students who took it a second time, right?
That information is also it's actually on the last appendix there, of how many kids took it. Average number of times taken. So second time is like 17%.
How does that compare to the prior cohorts? Do we know?
Isn't it here?
You can see it on the back thing. It starts with
Last
2019
year,
and goes to
there's page of your
2023.
report. No, not that one, the big thick one.
It looks like it's the last page of the student achievement report. So not the slide deck, but the actual report in the appendix.
So in 2023, the average was 1.38 attempts, 73% of students taking it one time.
Yeah.
17.9% taking it twice, 6.93 times. And so on.
Yes.
Some pretty significant change from 2021 to 2023, but other than that, it seems to be
That
within,
might have been COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah, spring of 21.
So as we think about what does that mean for college and career readiness indicators, where are our action steps this year? Really looking to identify AP potential, use those AP potential scores to help identify kids who are ready to enroll in AP courses, as well as taking a step back and reviewing our AT identification process to ensure that all students who are in need of a challenge have an appropriate challenge. As well as looking to create some additional structures to proactively support students who might not be on track for graduation, those freshmen, by making sure we have some individualized plan with ongoing monitoring to ensure that students are earning the credits we need them to earn that freshman year.
Didn't realize my mic.
Before we move off that, can we talk a little bit about the B or higher GPA? When we look at slide 35 from the SAR, there's a nice summary of in the B or higher GPA column, 11, 10, 9, and then you'll see on the on-track indicator, the 91% versus 97% for grade 9. When we start talking about that chronic absenteeism, if we believe that chronic absenteeism in the high school is one of the contributors to all these red cells on slide 35 in terms of the percentages of students who have yet to achieve that B or higher GPA. And then we see that, 6% versus our goal of 97% being on track for graduation. Can we look hard at whether or not the chronic absenteeism is the contributing factor or a contributing factor and really focus on the last couple of years that we have with these students from 9 to 12 to really, because when we look at the AP participation rate, it's unlikely to be the kids who have lower than B averages who are testing eligible. There may be some, and that'd be nice to know. But it's more likely that we have some challenges on folks who are struggling to be present as well. And so I didn't see that in the action plan, but the red cells are right here in front of me on 35.
For sure. Absolutely, we can do that. Part of what we do when we look at chronic absenteeism is look to see kind of do a kind of like we sort them by who are kids that are chronically absent that are underperforming, kids who are chronically absent that are continuing to perform high, because that tells me a different story. But yes, I think we could absolutely connect it back to their GPA.
Yeah, I think the issue is a broader issue. I use the chronic absenteeism as one, but when you look at the percentage differences between the goal state, just take grade 11. Our goal this year is 76% with a B or higher average. We have only 63%. These are greater than 10 percentage point differences in every one of these cells. And so if it's not chronic absenteeism, then what is it? If you go back, there's 87% of the students self-report the desire to go to college, and we have some 10-point gaps or greater in B average.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We did pull some things in terms of grade distribution to kind of help us unravel that. But I like the question you're asking, and we'll be much more clear about how can we make those connections.
And isn't that something we could get intervals throughout the school year where we are with? Is that on the dashboard?
It is on the dashboard.
Okay.
It's on the
That will be
dashboard.
at the next L&T
Okay.
meeting. We'll have that success indicators.
Yep. I think we're updating that every quarter.
Well, and if we are seeing, causal link or a high correlation there, then that would be another talking point for parents as we're reaching out to them to discuss the absenteeism and the drastic impact that it's having on their performance, especially for the students that he mentioned, the 87% that intend to be college bound.
Absolutely.
Right. So their actions would be, detrimental to their ideal outcome.
Yeah, I mean, that's also why I asked about the interventions that we're doing, right? I would really like to see us and come back to the board with what are some other things that we can do, to help with that. If there's tooling, if there's other things, right? Other institutions when they get these reports in, they have some automated actions that occur that, let parents know, or other things. Anything that we can do to help push that, if it's a, communication plan or other things, it's to me, as Mr. Wagner pointed out, I mean, that to me is self-evident. If you're not in class, you're not getting the learning.
Agreed.
Yeah,
Agreed.
no,
And we do have some of those things kind of in place, but we can, I will maybe put a report together of here's all the things
Yes.
that we do so that you have a strong understanding of that.
because I guarantee you, every one of the principals out here, we're chomping to grab the microphone and tell us the 92 things that they're literally doing each and every day, because these leaders know the students who are chronically absent, and I guarantee you, each one of them have made phone calls home. But absolutely what Christine said, that we'll connect, make sure you have a comprehensive report as to what we're doing day to day. What does that look like, from kind of our heavy hitters to those who have just showed up on the report and what they're doing. But I absolutely know our leaders out here are making those calls, having those conversations, and doing some of that work. And are we seeing the growth there from that action step? Thank you.
I appreciate the point. I'm just going to illustrate it one more time. There are 9 cells in the progress towards on-track indicators for high school. Of those 9 cells, 7 are red, which means that we're missing the goal by greater than 10 percentage points. So for the high schools, that's 9 of 7 cells, and the early college credit at 58%. The goal that's reflected is 86%. So I'm not sure. I think there's a data issue there.
There is a data issue there,
But-
yes.
That would make it, if it was the 86%, then we'd be 8 out of 9 measures in the red. So I think it's worth looking really closely here and saying, why?
All right, so moving on to the impact of the pandemic, we identified 4 student cohort groups that have been most impacted by the pandemic, and we've been carefully kind of monitoring their progress and adjusting their instruction kind of along the way. For the class of 2025, proficiency levels have yet to return to pre-pandemic levels, and our overall growth towards proficiency has been slower than anticipated. As mentioned earlier in the report, students do not appear to be able to apply previously learned comprehension skills to more, as text becomes more complex, they're unable to apply those skills in the same way. And in math, we really struggled for them to apply those skills to real life situations, as well as use some of their algebraic skills in more complex problems.
And just, oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
And just as a reminder, that was the group. This is the current juniors, current grade
Yeah,
11.
current
They
grade
were
11.
in 8th grade when we did the hybrid.
Correct.
1 day in, 1 day out, as I recall.
Correct. Then for the class of 2026, this was the class that we originally talked about had some really nice growth in both ELA and in math. Having returned to pre-pandemic levels in math, which is exciting, and continued growth in ELA kind of along the way. For the class of 2027, we did see ELA proficiency levels return to pre-pandemic levels last year, and they continue to grow year over year in comparison to last year. While math proficiency levels have not yet quite returned to pre-pandemic levels for them, we are continuing to see growth growth from the previous school year. And then for our current 3rd graders, or the class of 2033, which seems like a really long way off, we're making some really nice strides in ELA with increases in proficiency levels, as well as students continuing to make high percentage of students meeting their stretch growth targets. However, we haven't seen the same level of success in math. And this is really by paying really close attention to this group of kids is really what brought the attention to us that our kids at the mid to above grade level weren't making as much progress or growing in a way. And that was an opportunity. This is also the 3rd full year we've had iReady data where we can say this is absolutely an ongoing trend for us really to identify that there's an issue with the pacing of which we're doing our 2nd grade math. And there's an opportunity here for us to improve upon that. So while we haven't seen the response that we wanted, we believe it's a curriculum pacing issue and not a student cohort issue. And that as students move into 3rd grade, previous trends have shown that those kids continue to make progress.
So what's happening for those, for those students who are in 3rd grade that we know have this curriculum pacing issue? How are we rectifying that?
Yeah, so our teachers are definitely working with that. Part of the problem has to do with the way the standards lay out in 2nd to 3rd grade. There's a lot of heavy, meaty standards in 3rd grade, so those kids are getting that challenge. But what we could be doing is compacting and offering some of those skills earlier to students. So our current 2nd graders, we're going to be able to compact some of that curriculum and get them some 3rd grade earlier, which would then allow us to move at a faster pace in 3rd grade. So our current 3rd graders aren't going to have the teachers are obviously differentiating for them, but they won't have the 3rd grade curriculum is very packed is what I'm trying to say. And this will just help kids to be better prepared for 3rd grade.
Right. So what I'm hearing is 2nd grade students are going to benefit from this learning. But it sounds like it's a case by case basis that we're putting to the teachers to address this for the current 3rd graders.
What we don't see the same problem in 3rd grade that we see in 2nd grade is what our data would tell us.
Okay.
So kids like if we think about last year, the kids that we saw the same problem in 2nd grade with, when they got to 3rd grade last year, they overcame that problem. And we started to see them growing at a faster rate, or they were continuing to master the curriculum. But we feel like we're losing or not utilizing an entire year for some of those students where we could be moving them faster. So overall, they're going to get to more advanced concepts later more quickly. Our current third graders are not going to benefit from what we discovered.
Understood.
Okay.
Right. My question is very specific to how are we remediating what's happened, what's already occurred for the third grade? So how are we right? How are you fixing, how are you remediating what's already
Already in
occurred?
place.
Christine, it's okay if you get
No,
back to me.
I will. I think, yeah, let me think about that and come back with how to better articulate what I'm trying to say. Thank you for giving me an out. I appreciate that. All right. So thinking through kind of what are our next steps, particularly around our cohorts, and really thinking in terms of the gains we're seeing, really has been based upon us really focusing in on designing first best instruction for our students with a focus on maintaining and keeping kids in grade level standards, grade level targets, grade level assignments, grade level text. And by doing that, and then when we see those holes, really thinking about it from the perspective of acceleration versus remediation. What skills do kids need to access the lesson today, and teaching those and pushing kids forwards? That makes sure that we don't create larger gaps by going back and trying to remediate before we continue moving forward. And so we've seen some success with that, and we're going to continue to do that, particularly with this group of students. Or these groups of students is what I should say.
So that kind of, I think that might be what you were looking for, Mr. Lentz. So if you've already started work, if the PLCs are doing this kind of work on holding on to high expectations in the high rigor of the standards, the third grade kids should be held to those high standards that in a very packed third grade math curriculum. Teachers are getting that information I'm just repeating what I've been hearing. They are getting that learning information every 5 days in their PLC. They should be able to see if this third grade group has gaps. They should be accelerating that learning, not remediating, but accelerating that learning so the kids won't lose time, even though you're going to fix third and second grade in the future.
Yeah, just to be clear, the kids in second grade, what we were seeing was the kids that were at the top were having less growth in second grade because they weren't being exposed to as much rigor in the curriculum. In third grade, that rigor comes back just by the nature of the way the standards are laid out, which then our high-end kids start to grow again. But what we're saying is we can do better than that by hitting and improving some of the compacting in second grade. We ultimately will create a better system for all kids.
And I certainly appreciate that, right? If I take a step back and speak a little bit on why I'm interested. First of all, I have a personal interest in the third grade cohort. But that group was heavily impacted with COVID, with remote learning, with the masking, with a number of other things. And then they had the benefit, and again, we made absolutely the right move to update the curriculum on them, right? And that was at a key, and that's why, again, I don't want to I'd love for you to spend a little bit more time on it. I'm certainly willing to have a, offline conversation on this, but that's where my question is coming from, right? Because they got hit really, really hard in the pandemic,
I agree.
right? And then they got hit, with the worthless curriculum that we got rid of, right? And gave them a good curriculum. But again, there's a big change that they've had to endure in that. So that's why that's kind of where I'm coming from on it.
I think one of the things that I draw from the whole report, and thank you so much for all you've done to put this together, is the rigor piece, which is what we heard in our equity audit, that we have pockets where rigor, and having been a teacher, I want all my kids to be successful. And I taught before there were standards, believe in in the early century of, but before some of you were born, so to speak. I hope that whatever we come across as a board is that what we're looking for is to maintain that high rigor, because that's how kids become successful, not lowering the standards because we want kids to do well, but finding ways to make sure that they are achieving what we minimally expect all kids to do.
Absolutely.
And I think that's where it's frustrating and disheartening when you work really hard and your kids aren't performing, but we've got to give teachers those opportunities to be sure. And I think that's where before Dr. Gordon does the PLC work.
It's hard to allow kids to sit in productive struggle.
Yes.
Right? And we're working really hard to help. We're setting that standard. We're having conversations about the importance of that standard, and then really helping support teachers in how do you let kids sit in productive struggle. So yes, I guess I'm saying yes. One more thing, hang in there with me. As I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we established the research-based on-track indicators, and Mr. Lackner has talked about those. I'd really like to take that opportunity to just bring it all together and provide a comprehensive overview of what that means. And as you can see here, we've got big picture overview of our progress, and we see success in meeting ELA benchmarks, as I mentioned, in grades 5 and 8. While we didn't meet in grade 3, we saw pretty significant gains, as well as highest levels of proficiency we've seen since changing to the standards. Again, there's definitely some concerns as it relates to math, but those scores are all within 5 percentage points of our goal. And as we look to see, we're feeling like there's likelihood that we can meet some of those goals. And then we definitely have some concerns when we look at our high schools. In particular, how do we make sure that our students are not only on track, but that they're meeting those proficiency levels and over time, and that's a place that we need to continue to build some work. It's clear, and as we look at these 25 benchmarks that we set, that as we set those, we underestimated the impact of the pandemic and the length of time it was going to take some of our students to return to levels. That's what we're seeing here. Like, we definitely see that, particularly with our older students. I think I can only speak for myself, but I anticipated that the impact of the pandemic would be harder on our younger kids because they didn't have some skills that we were really working to work through. But I think what we're seeing is it actually impacted more strongly our older students than we anticipated, or I anticipated. I should only speak for myself. Another piece for us to really think through is that, or to put some context, is when we set these benchmarks, we use the ISB benchmarks. So they set some benchmarks that we were required to meet. And by 2025, those benchmarks indicate what ISB had indicated we needed to meet. And they were pre-pandemic. Since that time, ISB's been really working through and monitoring student growth and how kids are responding to that pandemic, and have adjusted what those benchmarks are for us. I'm in no way indicating that we should change our goals. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just trying to put it into perspective so that we can kind of understand that, we underestimated, definitely a problem. And I don't want that to necessarily overshadow some of the positive growth that we did experience over the last school year. With that, are there any other questions I can answer?
Kind of keeping with, this, what are things that, coming out of your analysis of this, that, challenges that you would need the board's help to try to overcome, right? What are some things that, that we can do to help accelerate this, to get resources, to do other things, to remove obstacles from this, right? Because as we look at this, and as Mr. Lackner pointed out, right, there's a lot of red, especially in, as you said, Christine, the high school. what are the things that, Paul, that you and the team need?
I think the board did a tremendous amount with the contract. Being able to have partners with our principals, the department chairs, learning, teaching, moving that work forward. That's key to this high school work, is the partnership between district office, our school leaders, and the department chairs with our teachers. That's some of the most important work that we have to do. I'm going to go back to Mrs. McCabe, what she was talking about. It's clearly identified in that report. We have pockets of rigor. We still have some pockets of rigor. That has to change. Those are the pieces that have to change, that we have that consistency, and why we all believe so much in the PLCs. And again, PLCs is a really broad umbrella. Part underneath that umbrella is ensuring that we have essential standards at every grade level in every content. And that's what we're holding student learning towards, that we're developing quick checks and common assessments to be able to check our work and to check student learning by approving, what the board did with when Christine came forward to the board August at some point, and we asked the board, can we purchase the proficiency scales? That's huge. That limits the amount of time our team are working on those pieces and putting it right into the hands of our educators to start setting those bar for rigorous classroom instruction, rigorous classroom texts, and then rigorous quick checks, common assessments, and other assessments. For us, that's that work that we have to continue doing. The time we've allocated in that contract is huge. We have to use that time exceptionally well. We have to keep pushing on, are we using product and process time? Those 4 days to look at evidence of student learning. And once we do, what are we doing with our planning time to sit and really think about that work? I think what the board has clearly communicated, and ever since I've been here, the board has clearly communicated this. We must improve. Mrs. Fairgrieve said it beautifully. Every one of the board members that I know that sit at this table have that same passion and want to improve it. What I would ask is what you're doing, continuing to hold me accountable for the organizational goals, so we move forward. And then when we do have resource requests, that we clearly articulate that to the board. You ask the good hard questions and potentially have those pieces approved. But I wish there were a silver bullet that I could just put in place right now to make things work. But this is that partnership we've talked a lot about. District office, school leaders, our principals, directors, our district office, and our teachers, all of us working together. We have evidence. When we do that, we do it exceptionally well. We have evidence that we know when things work, we do it well. We continue engaging at the high school level with our department chairs, with our educators. We have to continue to have quick checks, looking at that data and responding. That's what's going to change it. At the heart of instruction are great teachers with really good instructional practices that they're implementing and checking on a regular basis. That's how you do this work. Again, we also have to have a really strong curriculum that the board has also approved. Each time we brought it forward, the board has said yes to those pieces. So mine is, yes, keep doing what you're doing. Keep asking us the hard questions you ask us. Keep holding me accountable to this report. You're right. It's hard to finish with this report. We talked about it, just from a stylistic. It doesn't feel good when you finish with the SAR with a lot of red. But my belief in all of these people and in our teachers and our team is that we're not going to see that going into the future. We're going to continue to work this. But for me, I'm a huge process person. We have to do the process the way we've laid the process out. There are no quick and easy ways around it. There's no quick way to do PLCs. There's no quick way to look at student evidence of student learning. There's no quick ways to plan really high quality instruction. And part of that is looking at our data on a regular basis and owning that our data is based off of our instruction. Those are hard pieces to own. And our principals and our teachers, and they all do. It's all that work going into it. But it's what the board's doing currently. I think the board sends me a clear message, and I can guarantee you it's sending a clear message to every one of our leaders here that we want to continue to grow, and we've got your back, and we'll do the things that we need to do. That's what I'd ask the board to continue doing.
Other thoughts, other questions, anything else to add?
Just one other thing. There's two small tables of like how each building is doing, just stylistically, and especially for all the leaders that are in here. I would love to not have to go to the state scorecard as a board member, to see how each of our schools is doing. I would love to see that in the SAR.
We can put that. Yeah, and the other piece that we could put in there, especially in the appendix side of it, because really the SAR is kind of that big whole district. How are we doing that health check as a district? But then that next piece is be able to see we have 4 schools rated at the highest level. We have the rest in commendable, and those are really big pieces. I mean, at that highest end, that's top 10% of all schools at that level who are achieving that. And I don't know if we do enough to celebrate that. And even commendable is a really good recognition for the work we're doing. So I appreciate you highlighting that and then putting that pieces into the appendix of the report.
Well, to that end, that's the other thing. Like while there is red, right, there are certainly some things that were pointed out that are celebratory items. And that's one thing that, again, just personally, that I would like to see administration bring forth more to the board for those things. And so the presentation that we had with the consultant, yes, I would, again, I'll reiterate what I said at that meeting, is that I would like to see some of those things as far as, again, next school year or whatever, those things being brought, and then the leaders being able to celebrate the teachers in their buildings and other things, celebrate some of the student achievements. Because again, I think that is so important for us if we want to build this culture, to bring forth those things that are doing well, that are important, and use those as examples.
We're going to have that in December with our success indicators update at that learning teaching. So we'll have that there for you. We definitely heard you.
Okay. Anything else? I think that then brings us to, hold on, let me bring up my agenda here. Future agenda items. Item 3A.
Absolutely. So December, we're going to have an update on our success indicators. Just heard that. As well as we'll be bringing back the multilingual report in terms of our comprehensive review and some plans for moving forward.
Another small.
We're not going to do it back to back with the business services, are we?
Okay, well, that will take us then to item 3B, adjournment. And just one final thought. Thanks again for everybody in the audience. Thanks for all the work that went into this discussion. Thanks for the robust discussion that we've had. And I can't stress enough that we welcome feedback from the public and everyone involved. So please continue to bring that coming. It's only going to make us better. So with that, we will, what's that?
See you tomorrow night.
Yes, indeed. See you tomorrow night and probably Wednesday night as well. That brings us to adjournment, 7:58 PM. Thank you.